"So you're really coming to our wedding?" Lily, my brother's fiancée, said. "I'll be embarrassed to introduce you as my sister-in-law to our relatives. My name is Katie. I'm 37 years old and single. I dropped out of school, but I'm not ashamed of it or my single status. In fact, I'm proud because it allowed me to live a happy life with my family. I come from a poor family, my father wasn't around, and my mother had me and my younger brother, Georgie, who's 2 years younger than me. She worked hard to support us, but we often struggled to make ends meet. Sometimes, a relative would try to give my mom money, but she always refused, saying, 'Let us only rely on you when we're really desperate. We're okay for now.' When I asked her why, she said, 'If I take the money, his wife might get upset.' I secretly wished she had accepted the help. Georgie was a very smart kid and always top of his class in school. As his proud older sister, I thought he was going to do amazing things in life. His teacher even recommended him for a top school, but we didn't have the money for it. He ended up going to a less prestigious school, and I felt awful about it. To make up for it, I dropped out of school and started working right away. The truth is, I didn't like studying, so I saw this as a chance to start working. However, most jobs for people who dropped out didn't pay well. I ended up working in a small office, but when the office owner retired, he recommended me to a better company, and I got a good-paying job there. I worked hard and even became a manager at 35, earning a salary similar to other college graduates. However, my brother's fiancée, Lily, doesn't seem to like that I'm a dropout, especially since Georgie graduated from a prestigious university and is now doing well as a salesman at ABC Trading. Lily seems to think I'm a failure because I didn't go to college. I was surprised when Georgie told me that Lily had asked, "Is your sister some kind of problem person?" Lily's dad is a director at ABC Trading, and she's very attractive, but I'm not sure she's a nice person. Once, she came to our house, but when she saw our modest apartment, she refused to come inside and even complained, even though I was dressed up nicely. Lily seemed embarrassed by my family and didn't like that Georgie, her boyfriend, was commuting from our modest place. She used her father's position as the head of a department to get Georgie moved into company housing. Even though he wasn't supposed to be eligible, she made up an excuse, saying they would live there once they were married. The catch was that only approved people could visit the company housing, and even close family members had to apply each time. I joked, saying, "I guess I can't visit often, I just wanted to peek at your happy new life." But Lily's mother responded coldly, saying, "That's exactly why we decided to have them live in a family house." Lily was rude to my mother when she visited. She whispered to Georgie, out of earshot, "Your mother-in-law is poor. Georgie will have to keep paying his student loans even after marriage. It's natural for parents to pay for tuition, right?" And she gave my mom a mean look. The truth is, my mom and I saved money for Georgie's college fund, but he insisted on paying for it himself. Lily and her mom have tough personalities, but Georgie knows this, even though they act like they're important, like celebrities. I also wanted my mom to move into the company housing, but Lily said the husband's siblings can't live there, so I'd be left alone, which she found pitiful. When I told her that I graduated from college on a scholarship, Lily's mom pretended to be impressed, saying, "You must want to help your mom as soon as possible. You're such a thoughtful and wonderful person." Lily's family talked about how kind they were, and at first, I thought there was no need to say anything bad about them, but that was a mistake. Lily and her family started to exclude both me and my mom, especially me. Half a month before the wedding, Lily suddenly contacted me, asking if I was going to attend. Georgie is my only brother, but the wedding venue was very fancy, with around 150 guests expected. They even invited the president and managing director of ABC Corporation and other high-level clients, since Georgie's marriage to the daughter of the head of the department was a big deal. I thought they might not have enough room for me at the wedding, but then Lily said, "I think the guests will feel uncomfortable if there's a poor-looking sister-in-law." I was shocked. "What do you mean by poor-looking?" I asked. "I plan to wear a proper formal outfit for the wedding." Lily responded, "Your proper outfit is probably a cheap suit from a catalog, right? It's embarrassing to be surrounded by people wearing high-end brand clothes." She had clearly judged me as being at the bottom of the social ladder. I was fed up with her attitude that poor people shouldn't be invited to her wedding, so I asked, "What about my mother? She doesn't have high-end brand clothes either." Lily replied, "I know, but I can't not invite Georgie, who's doing well at the company. I just don't want to be embarrassed by you or your relatives, so we'll get your mom some nice clothes." I was really upset by how she was speaking. But I tried to tell myself it was just her way of being considerate so my mom wouldn't be embarrassed at Georgie's big event. But then Lily said something that took me by surprise. Of course, you'll have to buy that dress. It's an Oscar de la Renta evening dress, so you'll need to prepare about $10,000. I was stunned. Wait, I can't afford that. Lily coldly replied, if you can't pay, then do you plan to stand next to my parents in a cheap dress? I couldn't believe it and asked what Georgie thought. Lily said, I haven't told Georgie yet. Of course, he thinks you and your mother will come, but it'll hurt his future if his mother is unmarried and his sister is a dropout. I don't think being a single mother or a dropout affects someone's career anymore. I didn't want to let Lily's prejudice get to me, so I yelled, this is my only brother's wedding, so both my mom and I will attend. We'll pay for our clothes, but if you can't stand us, just don't invite us. I told my mom everything and asked for her advice. She seemed sad for a moment but then smiled and said, don't worry, Katie, I promised you I'll make Georgie happy, just leave it to me. She then made a phone call, and I had no idea what she was planning. On the wedding day, the ceremony was held in the chapel. I had been worried about whether or not to tell Georgie what Lily had said, but since I'd left everything to my mom, I decided to stay quiet. However, Georgie looked tense. Was it just nerves, or had my mom said something to him? After the ceremony, I was shocked when I looked at the seating chart for the reception. My mother's name was the only one in the family section, and I couldn't find my name anywhere. I thought, wait, there's no seat for me? They were really trying to exclude me from the reception. Just then, Lily's parents showed up and gave me a look of disdain. They said, I can't believe you didn't understand when Lily told you not to come to the reception. We let you attend the ceremony because we had no choice, but we don't want you spreading your poverty around at the reception. Go home, dropout sister. I thought, like mother, like daughter, fine, I'll go home. As I turned away from Lily's parents, who were smirking, I saw the CEO of Nico Mimi Corporation, a listed company and business partner of Lily's father, standing with Georgie. Mr. Ashcroft smiled at me and said, Katie, you're in the way, sorry about that. Lily's parents replied, we were just getting rid of an unwanted guest. Then Mr. Ashcroft spoke up, if you insist on kicking Katie out, then I, as her father, will also leave the reception. I was shocked. Father? Wait, what do you mean? I asked. Lily's parents stared at him, confused, not believing what he was saying. Mr. Ashcroft repeated, as I said, Katie is my daughter. It turned out that Mr. Ashcroft and my mother had been in a relationship when they were in their 20s. At the time, Mr. Ashcroft was an executive and on his way to becoming the CEO, while my mother had lost both of her parents in an accident and was left alone. Their relationship wasn't accepted from the start. When my mother got pregnant with me, Nico Mimi Corporation, Mr. Ashcroft's father's company, was about to go bankrupt. Everyone opposed their marriage, saying it wouldn't help the company, so my mother decided to put their marriage on hold until the company was in a better situation. She raised me as a single mother, even though it was hard because of the stigma. By the time my mother was pregnant with Georgie, the company still hadn't improved much. Then the daughter of a CEO from another company offered to help, and she proposed marriage to Mr. Ashcroft. My mother, seeing how important it was for him to revive the company, decided to step aside. She told him, I'll raise our 2 kids properly, you don't have to acknowledge them, just be happy with that woman and revive your company. After marrying the CEO's daughter, Mr. Ashcroft not only revived the company but grew it so much that it became a listed company. However, they didn't have any children and divorced a year ago because of his wife's infidelity. After the divorce, Mr. Ashcroft reached out to my mother and proposed that they reunite. A few days before Georgie's wedding, I met with Mr. Ashcroft, the company president, and my father. I suddenly recognized the man standing with Georgie. He was the same man who had visited our apartment a few times during my childhood, trying to give my mother money. He turned out to be Mr. Ashcroft, the president of Nico Mimi Corporation. When I stared at him, he smiled and said, You've really been through a lot. I've heard about the wedding from your mother. Mr. Ashcroft, who was now Georgie's business partner, knew how capable Georgie was. He wanted Georgie to take over Nico Mimi Corporation, but he was concerned if Georgie couldn't see the true nature of malicious people, like Lily and her family, and didn't respect his mother and sister. Mr. Ashcroft couldn't trust him with the company, so he was using the wedding to test Georgie's character. The day before the wedding, Mr. Ashcroft and my mother told Georgie the truth about their past relationship and how Lily's family was trying to exclude us. Shocked by all the revelations, Georgie, who had trusted Lily and her parents, felt uneasy about the wedding. That's why he looked so stiff during the ceremony. When Georgie saw that my name wasn't on the seating chart and saw Lily's parents trying to kick me out of the reception, he knew what my mother and I had told him was true. He took Lily to the reception desk and declared, "Lily, Mr. and Mrs. Lily, I'm annulling this marriage. I have no intention of becoming a part of a family that disrespects my precious mother and sister." Lily and her parents were shocked. Lily, not understanding the situation, said, "Georgie, are you choosing that low-life mother and daughter over me? You should know your place." Lily's parents turned pale and tried to stop her, but it was too late. I explained everything to Lily, and she collapsed, crying. Mr. Ashcroft added, "I guess we'll have to reconsider our business with your company," which caused Lily's parents to burst into tears and beg for forgiveness. Everyone at the reception witnessed this, and the whole event was cancelled. Georgie completely cut ties with Lily and refused to submit the marriage registration. Afterward, I received a furious phone call from Lily, screaming, "You're the reason." Lily called me later and said, "I couldn't marry Georgie. I'll be billing you for compensation and the cancellation fee for the venue." I responded, "Oh really? Then I'll sue you for defamation. Everyone at the reception heard you and your parents using abusive language." She went silent. I then added, "I should probably tell your father that I was threatened by Lily. If I do, Nikomimi Corporation might completely stop doing business with ABC Trading. Won't your dad lose his job then?" Lily started crying, but I just hung up the phone. Serves her right. Georgie, who had cancelled his marriage to Lily, later joined Nikomimi Corporation and worked hard to become his father's right-hand man. Now, my parents are getting married soon. My mother, who is shy about having a wedding at her age, looks genuinely happy when we pick out her wedding dress together. I've always been focused on my work, but now I'm starting to think that maybe one day, I'd like to wear my mother's wedding dress.
I took a deep breath and steadied myself as I entered the conference room. Elliot was already there, pacing back and forth, deep in conversation on his phone. "Listen, I need that money transferred by tomorrow. No excuses," he snapped. "My wife thinks it's for our latest development project. She has no idea." My heart sank. I had my suspicions about Elliot's shifty behavior lately, but hearing him outright admit to deceiving me was a gut punch I wasn't prepared for. Elliot ended the call and whirled around, his face flushing when he saw me. "Tessa, how long have you been standing there?" "Long enough," I replied, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "What's going on, Elliot? What are you up to?" He shook his head and forced a chuckle. "It's nothing, babe. Just some last-minute details for the Oakwood project. You know how it is." I narrowed my eyes. "Don't lie to me. I heard you loud and clear. You're secretly moving money around, and you're using me to fund something shady." Elliot's mask slipped and his expression hardened. "Look, we need to think about our future. This is just a temporary investment that'll pay off big time." "Without my knowledge or consent?" I shot back. "You're stealing from me, Elliot. From our marriage." He stepped closer, his jaw clenched. "I'm doing what I have to do to secure our financial stability. You should be thanking me instead of questioning my methods." I recoiled, suddenly fearful of the man I thought I knew so well. "This isn't you. What happened to the Elliot I married? The one who valued honesty and partnership?" Elliot's lips curved into a cold smile. "That Elliot is gone. This is the real me, Tessa, and if you're not with me, you're against me." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. How could I have been so blind? The man standing before me was a stranger, driven by greed and deception. But I wouldn't let him win, not without a fight. After that sickening confrontation, I knew I couldn't trust a word out of Elliot's mouth. He had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I needed to protect myself, both emotionally and financially. The next morning, I confided in my best friend Jessica over brunch. Her eyes widened as I recounted Elliot's damning phone conversation and his chilling admission of deception. "That snake!" Jessica hissed, slamming her fist on the table. I knew there was something off about him, but I never imagined he'd stoop this low. I nodded, blinking back tears. "I feel like such a fool. All this time I thought we were building a life together, but he's been playing me from the start." Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't beat yourself up, Tess. This is on him, not you. The important thing now is to protect yourself and your assets." Her words resonated with me. For too long, I had been blinded by love and trust, allowing Elliot to take advantage of my vulnerability. But no more. Over the next few days, I started digging into our financial records, cross-checking statements, and tracking where our money was going. The deeper I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. Mysterious withdrawals, offshore accounts, and bogus investment schemes that didn't add up. It became clear that Elliot's betrayal went far beyond emotional manipulation. He had been systematically siphoning funds from our joint accounts, using my hard-earned wealth to fuel his own selfish endeavors. The gravity of his deceit hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, power, and utter disregard for the vows we had taken. As the evidence mounted, a cold fury settled in my bones. Elliot had underestimated me, thinking I would remain a meek, oblivious wife forever. But I was done being a victim. It was time to fight back. With Jessica's unwavering support, I started gathering documentation and building a case against Elliot. I knew confronting him directly would only lead to more lies and manipulation, so I needed to be strategic, methodical, and utterly ruthless. No more Mrs. Nice Guy. Elliot had awakened a fire within me, and I was going to make him pay for every ounce of pain and betrayal he had inflicted. With a thick folder of evidence in hand, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation with Elliot. It was time to rip off the Band-Aid and expose his lies once and for all. I found him lounging in the living room, casually flipping through his tablet. The sight of his relaxed demeanor made my blood boil. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. Elliot glanced up, eyebrows raised. "What's up, babe?" I tossed the folder onto the coffee table, and it landed with a thud. "Don't babe me, you lying snake. I know everything." His eyes narrowed as he took in the stack of documents. "What's all this?" "Proof of your deceit," I spat. "Bank statements, wire transfers, offshore accounts, all the dirty little secrets you've been keeping from me." For a moment, Elliot's mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of panic cross his features. But he quickly recovered, leaning back with a sardonic grin. "You've been busy, I see, but you're overreacting as usual. This is all just part of a bigger plan, Tessa, a plan to secure our future." I shook my head, disgusted by his smooth lies. "Cut the crap, Elliot. I know you've been siphoning funds from our accounts, running scams behind my back. And for what, your own selfish gain?" He scoffed, spreading his arms wide. "Is that what you think? That I'd betray the woman I love for a quick buck? You wound me, Tessa." "Spare me the act," I snarled. "I have the evidence right here. You can't talk your way out of this one." Elliot's eyes hardened, and he rose to his feet, towering over me. "Listen carefully, Tessa. Everything I've done has been for us, for our family. If you can't see that, then maybe we're not on the same page after all." I stared back defiantly, refusing to be intimidated. "We're not on any page, Elliot, not anymore. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a weighted silence. Elliot's face contorted with rage, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might lash out physically. But then, just as quickly, his expression smoothed into a chilling calm. "A divorce, huh? Well, if that's what you want, sweetheart, you're in for a rude awakening." He stepped closer, his breath hot on my face. "I'll take you for everything you've got. The house, the cars, the business. It'll all be mine. And when I'm done, you'll be left with nothing but the clothes on your back." I held my ground, meeting his icy glare with unwavering resolve. "We'll see about that." As he stormed out of the room, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The battle lines had been drawn, and there was no turning back now. But I was ready to fight for my life, my dignity, and everything Elliot had tried to steal from me. This was war, and I had no intention of losing. After that explosive confrontation with Elliot, I knew I had to move quickly to protect myself and my assets. The gloves were off, and he had made it abundantly clear that he was willing to fight dirty, to take everything from me. I spent the next few days gathering every shred of evidence I could find. Bank statements, property records, tax filings, anything that could be used to untangle our finances and prove Elliot's fraudulent activities. With each document I uncovered, the web of deceit grew more intricate and sickening. It became clear that Elliot had been plotting his betrayal for years, meticulously setting up shell companies and offshore accounts to hide his ill-gotten gains. And all the while, he had been using me as a pawn in his twisted game, siphoning funds from our legitimate business ventures to fuel his own greed. The level of deception was staggering, and it made me question everything I thought I knew about the man I had once loved. How could someone be so calculating, so utterly devoid of conscience? As I pored over the records, a new discovery made my blood run cold. A secret bank account in Elliot's name, with deposits and withdrawals that didn't match any of our known investments or expenses. It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof that he had been squirreling away millions behind my back. Anger and betrayal burned within me, but I refused to let those emotions cloud my judgment. I needed to stay focused, to gather as much evidence as possible before Elliot caught wind of what I was doing and tried to cover his tracks. With the help of a forensic accountant recommended by Jessica, I began piecing together a comprehensive financial trail, documenting every transaction, every red flag, and every instance of fraud. It was painstaking work, but with each new revelation, my resolve only grew stronger. Midway through the process, I received a chilling reminder of just how high the stakes had become. A private investigator I had hired to dig into Elliot's background uncovered a disturbing piece of information. Elliot had already consulted with a high-powered divorce attorney and was actively preparing to file for dissolution of our marriage. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Not only had Elliot betrayed me financially and emotionally, but he had also been planning to leave me high and dry, stripped of everything I had worked so hard for. In that moment, I knew there could be no turning back, no compromise or reconciliation. Elliot had declared war, and I had no choice but to meet him on the battlefield, armed with the truth and an unwavering determination to see justice served. From that point on, every waking moment was consumed by the pursuit of evidence and the preparation for the legal battle ahead. I would not be caught off guard, and I would not allow Elliot to steal one more ounce of my dignity or my hard-earned success. This was personal, and I was playing for keeps. As the days ticked by, my investigation into Elliot's misdeeds only deepened. With each new layer I peeled back, the scope of his betrayal became more staggering and more personal. Through my network of contacts in the real estate world, I learned that Elliot had been quietly shopping around our most valuable properties, looking to cash out behind my back. It was a calculated move designed to leave me penniless and powerless in the event of a divorce. The revelation ignited a fresh wave of fury within me. Not only had Elliot stolen from me financially, but he was now actively trying to strip me of the very empire I had built from the ground up. It was a devastating blow, one that threatened to destroy everything I had worked so hard for. I knew then that I couldn't afford to play by the rules anymore. If Elliot was going to fight dirty, then so be it. I would match his ruthlessness with my own brand of cunning and determination. First, I consulted with a team of lawyers, outlining every shred of evidence I had uncovered and laying out my strategy for protecting my assets. They were impressed by the meticulousness of my case, and together we crafted an airtight legal defense designed to neutralize Elliot's every move. Next, I reached out to my most trusted colleagues and business partners, carefully revealing the truth about Elliot's betrayal and rallying their support. Many were shocked and appalled, but they rallied around me, offering their resources and backing to help weather the coming storm. With my allies in place, I took the offensive, striking first before Elliot could make his next move. I filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences in financial fraud, and immediately sought temporary restraining orders to freeze our joint accounts and prevent him from liquidating or transferring any assets. Elliot, caught off guard by my swift action, responded with fury. He bombarded me with angry calls and texts, spewing vile insults and threats, but I remained unfazed. His intimidation tactics held no sway over me anymore. I was beyond fear, driven by a singular purpose, to protect what was rightfully mine and see justice served. The ensuing legal battle was brutal, with both sides unleashing a barrage of accusations and counterclaims. Elliot's high-priced lawyers fought tooth and nail, trying to poke holes in my evidence and cast me as a vindictive, greedy ex-wife. But I stood firm, my unwavering resolve bolstered by the mountain of documentation I had amassed. With each court appearance, each deposition, I presented a meticulous, irrefutable case, laying bare the breadth of Elliot's deceit and financial malfeasance. And through it all, I refused to back down. Refused to let Elliot or his legal team intimidate or gaslight me. This was my fight, my moment to reclaim the power and dignity he had tried to steal from me. No more playing the victim, no more being the dutiful wife. This was war, and I was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as our family and friends gathered for the annual 4th of July barbecue. It was a tradition we had upheld for years, a time to celebrate and strengthen the bonds that held us together. But this year the facade of unity was shattered. Elliot and I regarded each other with barely concealed contempt, our once solid marriage now a hollow shell of bitter resentment and mistrust. As the guests mingled and made small talk, I caught whispers and furtive glances in my direction. Word of our impending divorce had spread like wildfire, fueling speculation and gossip. Elliot, ever the charmer, played the role of the wounded party, regaling anyone who would listen with tales of my supposed greed and unreasonable demands. I seethed in silence, biding my time. I knew Elliot was banking on his ability to manipulate the narrative, to spin his web of lies and cast himself as the victim. But not this time. This time I held all the cards. As the meal wound down and the crowd settled into a contented lull, I cleared my throat and raised my glass. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" Conversations trailed off, and all eyes turned toward me, curiosity and anticipation etched on every face. "First, I want to thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady and resolute. "This gathering has always been about family, about cherishing the bonds that hold us together through thick and thin." Elliot shifted in his seat, his expression guarded, sensing the shift in the mood. "Unfortunately," I continued, "not all bonds are meant to last. Some are built on lies and deception, twisted beyond recognition by greed and selfishness." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and I caught Elliot's eyes narrowing in warning. "For years, I have been the victim of a calculated betrayal," I pressed on, my voice rising. "A betrayal perpetrated by the very man who vowed to love and cherish me, my husband, Elliot." Gasps and shocked whispers filled the air as I laid out the evidence, pulling no punches. Bank statements, financial records, damning proof of Elliot's fraudulent activities. I presented it all, exposing the depth of his duplicity for all to see. Elliot's face flushed with rage, but he remained silent, trapped in the glaring spotlight of truth. "This man," I declared, gesturing toward Elliot, "has stolen from me, lied to me, and plotted to leave me destitute. He has violated the sanctity of our marriage and disgraced the values we all hold dear." The crowd was stunned into silence, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright disgust. Elliot finally broke, leaping to his feet. "You lying bitch," he snarled, his mask of civility crumbling. "You think you can turn everyone against me with your twisted version of the truth?" I met his gaze unflinchingly. "The truth needs no twisting, Elliot. The evidence speaks for itself." He opened his mouth to retort, but the words died on his lips as he took in the faces of our friends and family, the disappointment, the condemnation etched into their features. In that moment, I saw the realization dawn on him. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled, his lies and manipulations laid bare for all to witness. He was exposed, defeated, his power and influence reduced to ashes. A grim satisfaction washed over me as Elliot stormed off, his exit punctuated by the deafening silence of those he had once charmed and deceived. The battle was won, and though the war was far from over, I knew in that moment that justice would ultimately prevail. Elliot's reign of deceit had come to an end, and I had emerged from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. This was just the beginning. In the aftermath of my explosive reveal, the gloves truly came off. Elliot, humiliated and enraged, lashed out with a vengeance, unleashing a torrent of legal maneuvers and smear tactics designed to leave me broken and destitute. First came the lawsuit, a sprawling mass of accusations and fabrications aimed at painting me as the villain, a greedy, conniving wife hell-bent on destroying her innocent husband. Elliot's legal team bombarded me with subpoenas and depositions, dragging me through the mud in a desperate bid to discredit my case. But I stood firm, my resolve unwavering. With the support of my own formidable lawyers, I countered Elliot's claims with cold, hard facts, irrefutable evidence of his financial crimes and breaches of trust. Every lie, every distortion, was met with a measured, meticulous rebuttal, leaving no room for doubt or manipulation. As the legal battles raged on, Elliot resorted to more underhanded tactics, launching a vicious smear campaign to tarnish my reputation and turn public opinion against me. He planted false stories in the media, accusing me of everything from embezzlement to infidelity, desperate to regain the moral high ground he had so thoroughly lost. Through it all, I remained focused and steadfast, refusing to be drawn into the mudslinging and character assassination. My allies, the friends and colleagues who had witnessed Elliot's true colors firsthand, rallied around me, providing a bulwark of support against the onslaught of lies and vitriol. And still the fight raged on, each day bringing new challenges and fresh attempts at intimidation. Elliot's lawyers threatened, cajoled, and postured, but I met their every move with a steely resolve, never once wavering in my pursuit of justice. The emotional toll was immense, the stress and strain nearly unbearable at times. There were moments when I wanted nothing more than to give in, to surrender, and walk away from the chaos that had consumed my life. But then I would remember the depths of Elliot's betrayal, the years of lies and manipulation, and a new wave of determination would wash over me. This wasn't just about money or assets anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth, and the life that Elliot had tried so viciously to destroy. So I pressed on, fueled by a burning desire to see this through to the bitter end, no matter the cost. And as the legal battles escalated, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. Key witnesses came forward, corroborating my evidence and painting a damning portrait of Elliot's misdeeds. Financial records that he had tried to bury resurfaced, shedding further light on the web of deceit he had woven. With each new revelation, Elliot's case grew weaker, his desperate tactics more transparent, and slowly, inexorably, the tide began to turn in my favor. Through it all, I remained resolute, my eyes fixed on the ultimate prize. Not just a legal victory, but a reckoning. A moment of catharsis where Elliot would finally be forced to answer for the pain and suffering he had inflicted. It was a long, arduous road, but I knew in my heart that justice would prevail. And when that day finally came, I would savor every moment, basking in the knowledge that I had emerged from the ashes stronger, wiser, and utterly unbroken. The courtroom was deathly silent as the judge cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the assembled parties. After months of bitter legal battles, countless motions and counterclaims, this was the moment of reckoning we had all been waiting for. In the matter of Tessa Somerville versus Elliot Carver, the judge began, his voice ringing out in the hushed chamber, I have carefully considered the evidence and testimonies presented by both sides. My heart hammered in my chest as I exchanged a tense with my lawyer. This was it, the moment that would determine the course of my future, the culmination of everything I had fought for. The judge continued, his words measured and deliberate. The documentation and financial records provided by Mrs. Somerville paint a clear picture of fraud, deception, and gross mishandling of marital assets by Mr. Carver. A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery, but I remained focused, my eyes fixed on the judge's weathered face. Furthermore, he went on, the testimony of key witnesses and subject matter experts has corroborated Mrs. Somerville's claims, leaving little doubt as to the veracity of her accusations. Elliot shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched and his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. In light of the overwhelming evidence, the judge declared, I hereby grant Mrs. Somerville's petition for divorce on grounds of financial fraud and breach of marital trust. A collective gasp echoed through the room, but I barely registered it, too consumed by the wave of relief and validation that washed over me. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, I am awarding Mrs. Somerville full ownership and control of all marital assets, including properties, investments, and bank accounts. Mr. Carver's claims and countersuits are dismissed in their entirety. My eyes widened in disbelief, the gravity of the ruling sinking in. Not only had I secured my freedom from Elliot's web of deceit, but I had emerged victorious, my financial future and hard-earned success intact. Elliot, on the other hand, was visibly shaken, his face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief. "This is an outrage," he sputtered, rising to his feet. "You can't do this." But the judge silenced him with a stern glare. "I can, and I have, Mr. Carver. Your actions have been found to be reprehensible and in direct violation of the law. Consider yourself fortunate that criminal charges are not being pursued at this time." As Elliot slumped back into his seat, deflated and defeated, a profound sense of vindication washed over me. After months of turmoil and emotional anguish, justice had finally been served. In the aftermath of the ruling, I found myself overwhelmed by a swirl of emotions: relief, elation, and a newfound sense of empowerment. I had stared down the man who had tried to break me, and I had emerged victorious, my spirit and self-worth intact. As I stepped out into the bright sunlight, surrounded by the well wishes of my friends and supporters, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear. I was a survivor, a warrior who had faced down adversity and emerged stronger for it. Elliot's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but in the end, it had forged me into a woman of steel, a force to be reckoned with. The scars would linger, but they would serve as a reminder of my resilience, my unwavering determination to fight for what was right. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and set my sights on the future, a future of my own making, one where I would write my own destiny, free from the shackles of lies and manipulation. The battle was over, but the war had only just begun, a war for personal growth, for healing, and for the pursuit of a life lived on my own terms. And this time, I was prepared to fight with everything I had. I sat at my computer skimming through emails as I did every evening after work. Most were routine: bills, newsletters, the occasional spam. But one email caught my eye, sent to my husband Devin's account from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Our usual spot tonight?" My heart raced as I clicked open the message. The body was blank, but the implications were clear. Devin was meeting someone secretly, and I had stumbled upon evidence of his betrayal. I tried to rationalize it, grasping at any semblance of an innocent explanation. But the more I dwelled on Devin's recent behavior, the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the more everything started to make sense in a sickening way. That night, I feigned normalcy as Devin came home well past midnight, offering his usual vague excuses about work and client meetings. I smiled and nodded, burying my rage as I committed to uncovering the truth. In the following days, I traced Devin's movements like a seasoned investigator. I tailed him from a distance, watching as he met a striking young woman for clandestine rendezvous at cafes and parks. The way they interacted left no doubt. This was far more than a professional relationship. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? And why? After nearly 15 years of marriage, I thought Devin and I were solid. Clearly, I had been living a lie. Determined to gather undeniable proof, I utilized skills from my former career as a legal document analyst. I pored over our financial records, uncovering suspicious cash withdrawals and purchases I couldn't account for. The final stroke came when I installed hidden cameras and trackers in Devin's car and office. The footage left me shattered. There he was, my husband of 15 years, in passionate embraces with a woman young enough to be his daughter. As the days ticked by, an icy resolve took hold. I would no longer be the scorned wife who turned a blind eye. If Devin wanted to betray our vows and humiliate me, I would repay that betrayal tenfold. I began meticulously planning my attack, blocking out a weekend when I knew Devin's mistress would likely visit our home. Everything had to be perfect: the staged demeanor, the seemingly innocuous get-together I would insist on hosting. And when the time finally came, I would unleash the truth, ensuring Devin's indiscretions played out before an audience of not just his accomplished colleagues, but our entire social circle. Let the games begin. In the days that followed, I became a silent observer in my own life, studying Devin's every move with the scrutiny of a private investigator. Each morning, I would watch him leave for work, tracking the times he arrived and departed his office building. On several occasions, I tailed him from a distance as he made unnecessary detours, always to the same upscale plaza near the financial district. Working late again, he would claim whenever I confronted him about his delayed returns home. The lies dripped from his mouth with unsettling ease. If I hadn't seen the proof with my own eyes, I might have believed him. but I knew better now. During those secretive outings, I witnessed Devon slipping into classy bistros and dimly lit bars, always meeting the same slender, raven-haired beauty, his mistress. Her name was Sienna, I had discovered, an ambitious young professional at the same firm where my husband worked. Just how long had this torrid affair been unfolding? Months? Years? The thought made me ill. Some nights, parked across the street, I would watch them through the windows of Sienna's apartment as they cozied up on the couch, laughing and canoodling like love-struck teens. The sight of my husband's arms around another woman's waist, his lips pressed against hers, ignited a searing pain I could scarcely contain. Other times, Devon's meetings with his lover appeared more utilitarian, conducted in hushed conversations at out-of-the-way cafes. Business dealings, perhaps? I could only speculate. But the secrecy surrounding their interactions hinted at something deeply untoward. Throughout it all, I remained an invisible specter, documenting every sordid detail for the day of reckoning I knew was coming. I compiled meticulous records of dates, times, locations, anything that could be leveraged as evidence against the two snakes betraying me. "Hey, sorry I'm late," Devon would say upon returning home at night, his phone perpetually glued to his ear. "Client call ran long. You know how it is." My heart pounded each time he spouted those trite excuses. How I yearned to hurl his own deceit back in his smug face. "Of course, dear," I would reply, my voice sickly sweet with feigned understanding. "I know your career comes first." If only he knew how painfully aware I was of where his priorities truly lay, and with whom. As the days ticked by, I could feel the storm clouds gathering, fortifying my resolve. This facade couldn't endure forever. Eventually, the truth would detonate like a powder keg, decimating the life Devon and I had built. And when that day of destruction arrived, I fully intended to be the one who lit the fuse. With each passing day, the depth of Devon's betrayal became more apparent. As I scoured our financial records, glaring inconsistencies jumped out at me. Cash withdrawals that couldn't be explained, lavish expenditures on upscale restaurants and hotels. My husband was spending money like it was going out of style. Our money. "What's this charge for the Ritz-Carlton?" I asked one evening, feigning innocence as I waved a bank statement in Devon's direction. "I don't recall us staying there recently." Devon barely looked up from his phone, his thumb dancing across the screen. "Clients," he muttered distractedly. "Took a couple guys from Berlin out for the weekend. Big potential deal." I felt my blood pressure spike at his casual dismissal. Liar. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to unleash the full fury I'd been bottling up, to hurl every shred of evidence into his smug face. But I bit my tongue, recognizing that patience would be my greatest weapon. "I see," I replied tightly, masking my contempt with a thin smile. "Well, I certainly hope it was worth the expense." In the ensuing days, I continued slipping away at odd hours to stake out the series of coffee shops and posh eateries where Devon conducted his not-so-clandestine trysts. I observed him greeting Sienna with an uncomfortable familiarity, like a pair of longtime lovers rather than the co-workers they claimed to be. Their interactions dripped with intimacy. His arm casually draped around her shoulders, her fingers idly tracing patterns on his inner thigh beneath the table's cover. It made me want to vomit. While tailing them proved fruitless for recording salacious footage, it offered a steady drip feed of damning circumstantial evidence. Phone records confirmed the frequency of their communications. Dozens of calls and texts each day, most clustering during workday hours when Devon claimed to be busy on the job. Once, while lurking in a shadowed alcove near their favored bistro, I managed to capture an audio recording of their hushed conversation. "We can't keep doing this," Sienna was whispering furtively. "If Marcella finds out—" "She won't." Devon cut her off dismissively. "She's blissfully ignorant, hasn't suspected a thing." The arrogance in his tone made my skin crawl. Their words dissolved into tense murmuring after that, but the message was clear. Devon viewed me as a hapless, clueless fool, blind to the lengths of his deception. How terribly wrong he was. In that moment, something inside me hardened like stone. Any fleeting twinges of guilt or self-doubt evaporated, replaced by an icy determination to obliterate the fairy tale Devon had constructed. That night, every ounce of self-restraint was required to maintain my facade of nonchalance as we readied for bed. I watched him methodically brushing his teeth, smiling that plastic smile he reserved for when we were getting along. All the while, I fought back waves of revulsion at how easily he was able to feign domesticity. "Night, babe," he murmured as he slipped between the sheets, arm draped casually over my midsection, a grotesque mockery of intimacy. I tensed like a statue beneath his grazing touch, channeling every fiber of self-control to suppress my body's instinct to recoil. "Good night," I replied, my tone empty and devoid of feeling. As I laid awake in the darkness, harrowing thoughts swirled through my mind of what Devon's grand awakening would look like. I yearned to ensure the moment would be as devastating as the depth of his lies. For now, the game carried on. But he would soon discover that there were two masterful actors in this tragedy, and I was merely biding my time until the curtain rose. With each piece of evidence mounting against Devon, my determination to expose his lies intensified. I knew confronting him directly would be futile. He was too skilled a liar, too practiced at deflecting and denying. No, I needed irrefutable proof, the kind that would render him utterly defenseless when I finally unleashed the full force of his betrayal. It was time to take my investigation to the next level. Using contacts from my former career, I was able to acquire sophisticated surveillance equipment, miniature cameras designed to be concealed in household objects, GPS trackers small enough to affix to a vehicle's undercarriage. If Devon thought he could carry on his affair undetected, he was sorely mistaken. I spent hours meticulously planting the micro-cameras throughout our home, inside lamps, bookshelves, even the vent grating in our bedroom. Anywhere Devon and his mistress might let their guards down when they falsely believed themselves unwatched. With a few taps on my laptop, I could access a live feed to monitor their every move. The trackers proved even easier to implement. One morning before Devon departed for work, I slipped outside and quickly secured one to the underside of his car, activating it with a portable receiver that would alert me whenever the vehicle was in motion. From that point on, my husband's movements were an open book to me. It didn't take long for the surveillance to pay dividends. Within days, I began compiling video evidence of Devon's indiscretions, footage of him stealing passionate embraces with Sienna on our living room couch, obliviously making use of the home I had made for us. Their touchy displays of affection made me recoil in disgust and horror. In one particularly nauseating clip, I watched Devon and his lover half undressed and intertwined beneath my marital bedsheets, their nude bodies slithering together like slimy eels. I felt utterly defiled by the sight, like an unwitting voyeur to the most sordid variety of pornography. Combined with the GPS data mapping Devon's travels to all the same bars, restaurants, and hotels where I'd witnessed their trysts, the personal nature of this betrayal crystallized like a white-hot iron driving into my gut. This wasn't merely about money or lust or ego, as so many affairs often boil down to. This was a harsh truth, a reality where my husband had chosen to demolish the very sanctity of our marriage vows and defile the home I thought we had built together. Any remnants of the person I thought Devon was, the man I trusted and loved, eroded away with each new layer of deception peeled back. In his place remained a remorseless, selfish snake who seemed to derive twisted gratification from his duplicity. Every night after he returned home, feigning the role of dutiful husband and acting as though nothing were amiss, my grip on reality slipped a little more. Did he really view me as that pathetic, some empty-headed fool who could be deceived so effortlessly? The insult burned me from the inside out, becoming all I could dwell on. As enraging as the evidence seemed, however, it also filled me with a sense of wicked empowerment. The more I unearthed, the sharper the knives became for eviscerating Devon when the moment finally came to detonate this truth bomb and expel him from my life. His world was about to come crashing down, eaten by shattering Teton, and I would be the one swinging the demolition ball. For all his shameless audacity in orchestrating this double life, Devon remained blissfully ignorant of just how exposed he truly was. The arena was being prepared for his greatest humiliation, the grand unraveling masterfully choreographed. And I was going to savor every last excruciating second when the curtain finally rose. With each damning video file and financial record amassed, the path ahead crystallized before me. Devon's grand deception could no longer be allowed to fester in the shadows. It was time to force this sordid truth into the blazing light of day. I began plotting the perfect occasion to stage his downfall. A scenario crafted to meticulously undermine his every defense while maximizing his public shame and humiliation. Every detail had to be accounted for, from the players involved down to the sequence of events. Like a master choreographer, I would orchestrate a spectacle of cataclysmic proportions. After weeks of surveillance, I identified a prime opportunity, an upcoming weekend when Devon's usual haunts and travel mapped out in a predictable pattern. Sienna would undoubtedly find her way to our home for another depraved rendezvous, utterly oblivious that I had become painfully aware of their indiscretions. A bitter smirk crossed my lips as I began making preparations. I would be out of town that weekend on a supposed work obligation, or so the two snakes would believe, based on the trail of breadcrumbs I carefully laid. Little did they know their dirty little secret was about to be blown wide open. With surgical precision, I issued a series of invitations to close friends and select colleagues from Devon's firm, contriving a flimsy excuse about hosting a celebration for his recent promotion. The duplicity oozed from my lips as I peddled the ruse, but my moral convictions had been thoroughly eroded by this prolonged torment. "It would mean so much to have you both there," I insisted to one couple in a carefully practiced tone of warmth and hospitality. "Devon has worked so hard for this. I want to make it a night he'll never forget." By the time the fateful weekend arrived, the stage was immaculately set. I had strategically positioned cameras to capture footage from every vantage point in our home, ensuring not a single lurid detail would go unwitnessed. The guest list had been culled down to an intimate party, a trusted inner circle whose lives would be as upended as my own by the night's events. I also made sure to tip off one final attendee, someone from Devon's office that I knew would relish seeing his world crumble, an ambitious up-and-comer who resented playing second fiddle to his success. Corporate politics could be so deliciously vindictive when leveraged correctly. As our supposed celebration got underway, I played the role of gracious hostess with clinical detachment, masking my inner fury while feeding Devon's ego with hollow praise for his accomplishments. His chest puffed out like a pompous whistling bird, basking in the admiration while his young mistress looked on adoringly. "To Devon," I proclaimed with a raised glass, flashing him a wicked grin. "The man who has earned every single accolade through his tireless work ethic and unwavering integrity." Devon beamed like a delighted child, lips curling up in a smug smile as he accepted the toast. The arrogance was palpable, the self-assured bravado of a man who believed his carefully constructed facade could never be penetrated. Oh, how misguided his confidence would prove to be. Sienna sat a few seats away, hands folded demurely in her lap, as she watched the proceedings with the placid countenance of someone who thought they'd skillfully concealed their sins. Little did she realize her role as Devon's downfall accomplice was about to take center stage. As the night peaked with the cutting of an ostentatious celebratory cake, a gaudy spectacle meant to inflate Devon's ego one final time, I caught the vixen's gaze lingering on him with undisguised hunger. A shudder of revulsion ripped through me, cementing my resolve. Let the games begin. The faux celebration was in full swing by the time Devon and Sienna slipped away under the guise of freshening up. I watched them disappear down the hallway on the live video feed, my heart thudding with a mixture of dread and dark anticipation. This was it. The moment of truth I had been meticulously engineering for weeks. They didn't even attempt discretion as they entered the bedroom, peeling off their clothes in heated frenzy like a pair of libidinous teenagers. Sienna yanked Devon onto the disheveled sheets, her lips hungrily devouring his as they tangled together in a sweaty knot of illicit passion. My stomach turned as I witnessed the lurid display, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. This unseemly tryst was no longer some theoretical horror. It was viscerally, undeniably real, unfolding right before me in high definition. Gritting my teeth, I tapped the button to remotely kill the audio on the hidden cameras. As perversely gratifying as it would be to expose every sordid detail, I refused to subject our friends to that level of debasement. But the visuals alone would paint a devastating portrait. As the despicable sounds of their frenzied lovemaking reverberated through our marital bedroom, I stalked back down the hallway toward my unsuspecting audience with a large TV remote clutched in my white-knuckled grip. Their chattering voices fell silent as I entered, every head swiveling in my direction with curious stares. My face was flushed, radiating with a quiet fury that seemed to permeate the air like an ominous thunderhead. For a suspended moment, no one dared shatter the tension. Then a throat cleared. "Everything okay, honey?" Devon's business partner Marcus ventured carefully. "You look upset." An eerie calm washed over me as I leveled him with an icy glare. "Not at all," I replied, the syrupy sweetness in my tone belying the venom that was about to spew forth. "In fact, I think it's time for Devon to receive his special gift." With a deft flick of my thumb, I switched on the wall-mounted flat screen behind me, and chaos erupted. There they were, larger than life in high-resolution video, my husband and his vapid mistress fornicating shamelessly in the sacred space we once shared as man and wife. Clothes strewn haphazardly on the floor, Sienna's tanned limbs coiled around Devon's pale, glistening flesh as they clawed at each other like depraved animals in a mating frenzy. The horror and shock rippled through the room in waves as our guests recoiled, averting their eyes from the graphic display while choking out exclamations of disgust and dismay. Marcus slapped his palms over his young daughter's eyes, shielding their innocence from the sudden obscenity bombarding them. But not me. My gaze remained transfixed on the screen with a twisted sort of fascination, drinking in every anguished reaction as Devon's charade was immolated before their disbelieving eyes. Then he stumbled into view. Devon himself, hair tousled and face flushed with the heat of coition, eyes finally registering the depraved horror unfolding on that unforgiving screen. His jaw went slack as realization washed over him in crashing waves of shock and doom. Our eyes met through the camera's unblinking lens, his wide and mortified, mine glittering with the cold satisfaction of the disillusioned. In that moment, I could have sworn I glimpsed the flicker of fear igniting behind Devon's arrogant stare. Here it was, stripped bare. The reckoning I had so patiently orchestrated, come to deliver his ultimate humiliation and disgrace. "You," he choked out, voice quavering with a naked terror that thrilled me to my core. "Game over," I replied, permitting the barest hint of a smirk to grace my lips. I believe this performance has reached its shattering climax. It took every ounce of will to suppress the manic laughter bubbling up from the darkest recesses of my soul. Revenge, as they say, is a dish best served with enthusiastic relish, and I had choreographed the perfect menu. The explosion of shock and outrage that engulfed the room was cataclysmic. Devon and Sienna scrambled to cover their nudity as the lurid video continued to play out, but their desperate modesty came too little, too late. The damage was irreversibly done. "My God, Devon, what have you done?" Marcus spat out, face contorted with revulsion as he shielded his young daughter's eyes. You're despicable." The condemnations began raining down from every direction, a torrential outpouring of disgust and betrayal from those closest to us. Our supposed friends, the pillars of our community, whose respect and admiration my husband had so zealously coveted. Yet not a shred of remorse flickered across Devon's features as he stared back at them, boldly defiant even in the midst of his shocking exposure. The arrogance was staggering, solidifying my conviction that he alone was the architect of his own ruination. "Oh, don't act so bloody shocked," he sneered at the assemblage, gesturing dismissively. "Like none of you lot have ever stepped out before. You're just jealous I had the balls to go after what I wanted." An icy chill gripped the room as the weight of his callous words sank in. Was this entitled scumbag actually attempting to justify his adulterous indiscretion? My hands balled into white-knuckled fists, every muscle tensing with the Herculean effort of restraining myself from lunging across the room. But I would not be the one to shatter the delicious composure that night. No, that disintegration would stem from the very community he had betrayed. "You egomaniacal pig!" Keith, a former golf buddy of Devon's, barked out in a tone dripping with condemnation. "To think I welcomed you into my home around my wife and children. Did you have no sense of decency whatsoever?" The denunciations snowballed from there, each one more vicious than the last as the room's occupants seemed to feed off each other's collective disgust. Sienna cowered away from the verbal onslaught like a scorned dog, openly weeping at the ruin she had enabled. "You make me sick. Unfaithful swine. That poor woman." Through it all, my features remained an inscrutable mask of grim satisfaction. Let them vent their horror and expel every last shred of respect they once harbored. This rightful vilification was long overdue. When the barrage showed no signs of relenting, Devon made the fatal mistake of rounding his scornful glare upon me, those once charming eyes now burning with defiant hatred. The expression alone was like a lurid taunt, daring me to join the chorus of rebuke. "What, no token protest from the loyal wife?" he sneered, upper lip curling in derision. "Don't have the nerve to admit what a gullible fool I've made of you all these years." I felt the heat prickling in my cheeks, but refused to be baited down to his level of vulgarity. Not after so much painstaking preparation had been invested in securing this moment. Instead, I simply arched one daring eyebrow and replied, "I believe these people's actions have rendered any commentary from me quite unnecessary." The words dripped with undisguised menace, eliciting a few disconcerted looks from our guests. Good. Let the full extent of my cold resolution unsettle them, too. They were all bearing witness to the incineration of the chummy veneers we'd all been clinging to. The next volley would be even more searing. "Besides," I continued, turning towards the most prominent members of Devon's financial sphere with a wicked smile, "I'm sure your colleagues will be most intrigued to learn about the company resources you've been diverting towards your indiscretions." Several jaws dropped at the bald implication, including Mr. Walsh, a senior executive whose wife had enthusiastically attended multiple fundraisers I'd organized over the years. As the shockwaves began reverberating through that fraction of spectators, I permitted myself a satisfied smirk. This grand unraveling was only just beginning to detonate. The aftermath of that cataclysmic evening reverberated through every aspect of our lives like a neutron bomb detonation. In the searing fallout of Devon's exposed infidelity, nothing was left unscathed. Our marriage, our reputations, even his once prestigious career. As the incriminating evidence continued spilling out over the following weeks, the corporate titans who once lauded my husband as a rising star swiftly distanced themselves. Investigations were launched into his financial improprieties and misuse of company resources. Allegations of insider trading and embezzlement began swirling like a dark miasma. I had no idea the depth of Devon's deceit, his boss, Walter Green, professed in an interview, attempting to preserve his own image amid the burgeoning scandal. To say I'm appalled would be an understatement. He has deeply betrayed this firm's trust. Within a matter of days, Devon found himself unceremoniously ousted, resigning in utter disgrace as the sordid revelations mounted. The hefty severance and patched-together explanation he had once anticipated now lay in ashes. As for Sienna, the home-wrecking harlot at the center of this derailment, her ambitious trajectory imploded in spectacular fashion. She became a pariah among her colleagues, those who once curried her favor now recoiling in open disdain. I mean, who does that? I overheard one of her former office friends sneering during a partial run-in at the grocery store. Sleeping with a married man twice her age? She's utterly depraved. Their contemptuous whispers trailed off as they brushed past me, faces averted to avoid acknowledging the unfortunate woman whose marital world they had helped incinerate. I couldn't even summon the energy to feel gratified by their scorn. So much damage, so much humiliation and pain. Was this venomous inferno truly what I'd been coveting all along? In my darkest moments, I felt almost ashamed at having craved such catastrophic destruction. But then my mind would inevitably drift back to those agonizing weeks of holding vigil over Devon's indiscretions, enduring the casual ease with which he defiled our marriage vows. The anguish of discovering he valued my love so little, viewed me as nothing more than a hapless, disposable pawn in service of his own selfish whims. That was the violation I could never unsee or begin to forgive. As the legal proceedings for our divorce trudged onward with agonizing inevitability, I found myself eagerly discarding everything tainted by Devon's ruinous deceit, the family home, all his accumulated possessions, even childhood mementos that had once held sentimental meaning. Like prying off layers of spiritual scar tissue, I systematically purged any remnants of the life we had constructed, brick by immolating brick. It was freeing in a way, liberating to envision building myself anew without that dead weight of betrayal shackled to my soul. The final cosmic justice arrived in the belated implosion of Devon's finances. The legal fees, forfeited assets, and punitive damages levied by his former firm drained his resources with brutal efficiency. The ostentatious trappings of his material success, the McMansion, the imported sports cars, that obnoxious racing yacht, all liquidated to shifts of assets and garish auction blocks. Within a year's span, the man who had once arrogantly lording his affluence was effectively destitute, his reputation ruined, his finances gutted, his family shattered into irreparable shards. Whereas I had steadily begun reconstructing the shattered fragments of my own identity into something new. As the dust finally settled, our paths crossed one final time upon leaving court after the divorce decree was issued. Disheveled and haunted, Devon looked every bit the faded parody of his formerly smug, self-assured self. I almost pitied him until he opened his mouth. "Happy now?" he spat out through clenched teeth, venom dripping from his words. "You've won. You took everything that made my life worth living." I stared back at this broken husk of the man I once adored, feeling only a hollow emptiness. He was right. In pursuing this righteous vengeance, I had surrendered the past in its totality. The beautiful memories lay charred alongside the betrayal, the bitterness of our downfall tainting any remnant of what we'd once cherished. But I would not apologize for that loss, not after he had forced my hand so unforgivably. No, what I mourned most was the person Devon had once been, and who I thought I was marrying. The man of integrity and honor I had fought so hard for was clearly an illusion all along, and I was simply too blind to perceive the rot spreading from within. So as I turned to walk away into my hard-won future, one fundamental truth propelled me forward. That chapter was over, never to be revisited. When this person cusses you, he is wrong. He only says this to try to hurt you. I was free to author the next one from the indelible lessons of this sordid saga. And this time that story would belong to me alone. The doorbell rang, and Liana rushed to open it, greeted by the smiling faces of her boyfriend's family. They had arrived early for the surprise party, insisting on helping with the setup despite Liana's protests. As Dahlia, Reed's mother, stepped inside, she enveloped Liana in a warm embrace. "Oh, darling, you shouldn't have gone through all this trouble." Liana forced a smile, trying to hide her discomfort with Dahlia's constant displays of affection. "It's no trouble at all. Reed deserves a special celebration for his new job." Dahlia waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense, dear. You know I'm happy to chip in for the expenses. After all, you're practically family now." Before Liana could respond, Dahlia had already made her way to the kitchen, rifling through the cabinets and critiquing the party preparations. As the guests started arriving, Liana found herself swept up in a whirlwind of activity, greeting friends and colleagues, ensuring everyone had drinks and snacks. It wasn't until later, when she went to retrieve a bottle of wine, that she noticed an envelope tucked behind the dish rack. Curious, she opened it and found a credit card statement addressed to her. Her heart sank as she scanned the charges. Extravagant purchases at high-end boutiques, spa treatments, and lavish dinners, all totaling thousands of dollars. Liana felt dizzy, her mind racing. She had never applied for this credit card, and the billing address was unfamiliar. Clutching the statement, she stormed into the living room where Dahlia was holding court, regaling guests with tales of her latest charity endeavors. "Dahlia," Liana interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "Care to explain this?" Dahlia glanced at the statement, a flicker of recognition crossing her face before she quickly composed herself. "Oh, that? I simply opened a card in your name, darling. Your credit is so much better than mine, and I needed a little boost for some personal expenses." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the two women. "You what?" Liana's voice rose, incredulous. "You can't just open a credit card in my name without my permission." Dahlia shrugged, unperturbed. "Calm down, dear. It's the least you could do since you're living here rent-free. Think of it as your contribution to the household." Liana's hands shook with rage as she stared at the woman who had so casually betrayed her trust. In that moment, she knew their relationship had irreparably fractured, and the true depths of Dahlia's deceit had only begun to surface. In the days following the disastrous party, tension simmered beneath the surface of Dahlia's immaculate home. Liana found herself walking on eggshells, bracing for the next confrontation or underhanded remark from her boyfriend's mother. "You know, dear, it's really not that big of a deal," Dahlia said one evening, waving her hand nonchalantly as they sat down for dinner. "A little credit card debt is nothing compared to the sacrifices I've made for this family." Liana gripped her fork tightly, biting back a retort. She knew better than to engage with Dahlia's twisted logic. Reed, sensing the mounting tension, cleared his throat. "Mom, what Liana's trying to say is that it's illegal to open a credit card in someone else's name. It's fraud." Dahlia scoffed, spearing a piece of meat with her fork. "Don't be so dramatic, Reed. Liana's practically a part of this family. What's mine is hers, and vice versa." Liana felt her blood boil at the casual dismissal of her financial autonomy. "That's not how it works, Dahlia. You can't just help yourself to my credit and personal information without my consent." "Oh, please," Dahlia sneered. "As if you've ever had to worry about money. You've got that fancy job of yours, while my son struggles to make ends meet. The least you could do is contribute a little to this household." Reed shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding Liana's gaze. "I pay my share of the bills," Liana insisted, her voice strained. "And even if I didn't, that doesn't give you the right to steal from me." Dahlia's eyes narrowed, and she leaned back in her chair. "Steal? Such a strong word. I merely borrowed a little credit, that's all. And you'll get it all back once Reed finds a stable job and can start supporting us properly." Liana stared at her boyfriend, a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. She had known about Reed's struggles to find fulfilling work, but the way Dahlia phrased it made it sound like he was an utter failure, a burden on the family. As the weeks passed, Liana found herself drowning in a sea of emotional manipulation and financial abuse. Dahlia would make snide comments about Liana's extravagant lifestyle, while simultaneously demanding that she contribute more to the household expenses. "After all," Dahlia would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we're family now. And family takes care of each other." Liana knew she was being slowly suffocated by Dahlia's toxic grip, but she felt powerless to escape. Reed, caught between his mother's demands and his love for Liana, grew increasingly distant and withdrawn. It wasn't until Liana received a call from a debt collector, demanding payment on a loan she had never taken out, that the full extent of Dahlia's deception began to unravel. With shaking hands, Liana hung up the phone, her mind reeling from the debt collector's accusations. Another loan, taken out in her name without her knowledge or consent. She felt sick to her stomach, the weight of Dahlia's betrayal crushing her. She stormed into the living room, where Dahlia was lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine. "What is this?" Liana demanded, thrusting the loan statement towards her. "You took out another loan in my name?" Dahlia barely glanced up from her reading. "Oh, that... It was just a small personal loan to cover some expenses. Nothing to get worked up about." Liana's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Nothing to get worked up about?" "Dahlia, this is fraud. You're ruining my credit, my financial future, all for your own selfish gain." "Don't be so melodramatic," Dahlia chided, setting down her magazine. "I'll pay it back eventually. It's not like you're hurting for money with that fancy job of yours." Liana fought back tears of frustration. "That's not the point. You had no right to take out loans or credit cards in my name without my knowledge or consent. It's illegal." Dahlia sighed heavily, as if Liana were a petulant child throwing a tantrum. "You're overreacting, dear. It's just a little debt. Hardly the end of the world." "It is to me," Liana shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. "You've completely violated my trust, my personal boundaries. How can I ever feel safe or secure in this house when you're constantly stealing from me?" Dahlia's eyes narrowed, her saccharine mask slipping. "Watch your tone, young lady. This is still my house, and you'd do well to remember that." Liana's heart pounded in her chest as she stared down the woman who had once seemed like a loving, if overbearing, mother figure. Now she saw Dahlia for what she truly was, a master manipulator who would stop at nothing to maintain her lavish lifestyle, even if it meant destroying the lives of those around her. In that moment, Liana knew she couldn't continue living under Dahlia's toxic roof. She had to find a way out, to reclaim her financial autonomy and protect herself from further exploitation. As she turned and stormed out of the room, Liana made a silent vow to herself. She would document every shred of evidence, every deceitful action Dahlia had taken against her. And then, when the time was right, she would make sure Dahlia paid for her crimes. The first step, Liana decided, was to seek legal counsel. She needed to understand her rights and options for protecting herself from Dahlia's escalating schemes. With a renewed sense of determination, she picked up her phone and started researching attorneys specializing in fraud and identity theft cases. A few days later, Liana received a call from her bank, inquiring about an unusual withdrawal from her savings account. Her heart sank as the representative detailed the hefty sum that had been transferred to an unfamiliar investment account. Hands trembling, Liana thanked the representative and hung up the phone. She knew, without a doubt, that this latest financial disaster was Dahlia's doing. She found Reed in the backyard, tinkering with his old truck. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. Reed looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong?" Liana thrust the bank statement towards him. "Your mother has been stealing from my savings account. Thousands of dollars transferred to some bogus investment account." Reed's eyes widened as he scanned the document. "That can't be right. Mom wouldn't do something like that." "Wouldn't she?" Liana challenged. "After everything she's already done, the credit cards, the loans, this is just the next step in her twisted scheme to bleed me dry." Reed ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head in disbelief. "But she said it was for a business investment, a way for us to get ahead financially." Liana let out a bitter laugh. "And you actually believed her? Reed, open your eyes. Your mother is a con artist, plain and simple. She's been manipulating both of us from the start." Reed's shoulders slumped, and he wouldn't meet Liana's gaze. I had no idea she was taking money from your accounts. She said it was a joint investment, that you were on board with it." "Well, she lied," Liana spat, "just like she's been lying about everything else. How much more proof do you need that your mother is a criminal?" Reed flinched at her harsh words, but Liana couldn't find it in herself to soften the blow. She was done coddling him, done making excuses for his willful ignorance of his mother's misdeeds. "I'm sorry, Liana," Reed said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have seen what was happening. I should have stopped her." "Yes, you should have," Liana agreed, her anger simmering just below the surface. "But you didn't. And now, thanks to your mother's greed and your blind loyalty to her, I'm the one left picking up the pieces." She could see the guilt and shame etched onto Reed's face, but in that moment, she found it difficult to muster any sympathy for him. He had chosen his mother's twisted version of reality over the truth, and Liana was the one paying the price. As she turned to leave, Liana felt a newfound sense of resolve. Dahlia had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. It was time to stop playing by her rules, to stop letting herself be the victim. Liana would take back control of her life, her finances, and her future. And if Reed couldn't see the truth, if he continued to enable his mother's criminal behavior, then he would be collateral damage in Liana's quest for justice. Because this time, Dahlia had awoken a force she couldn't possibly comprehend. A woman pushed to her limits, hell-bent on revenge and redemption. In the days following the revelation about her stolen savings, Liana felt a burning rage simmering within her. She was done being Dahlia's victim, done playing by the rules of a game she hadn't agreed to. As she pored over the mounting evidence of Dahlia's financial crimes against her, the fraudulent credit cards, the unauthorized loans, the drained savings account, a plan began to take shape in Liana's mind, a plan for revenge, for justice, for reclaiming her autonomy once and for all. The first step was to secure what little remained of her finances. Liana made a series of phone calls, freezing her credit reports and closing any accounts that Dahlia might have access to. She knew it would be a long, arduous process to repair the damage, but she was determined to regain control. Next, she reached out to a credit repair service, determined to document every shred of Dahlia's deceit and hold her accountable. The representative she spoke with was sympathetic, guiding her through the necessary steps to build a case against her boyfriend's mother. With each passing day, Liana's resolve grew stronger. She began compiling a meticulous paper trail, collecting statements and records, piecing together the full scope of Dahlia's schemes. Dahlia, of course, remained oblivious to Liana's machinations, or perhaps she simply didn't care. Her casual disregard for the pain and destruction she had caused only fueled Liana's fury. "You'll get your money back eventually, dear," Dahlia would say with a dismissive wave of her hand. "No need to make such a fuss." But Liana knew better. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about justice, about exposing Dahlia for the manipulative, deceitful monster she truly was. As she plotted her revenge, Liana made a point to keep her distance from Reed. She couldn't bear to look at him, to see the echoes of his mother's betrayal reflected in his eyes. He had chosen his side, and Liana was done trying to make him see reason. Instead, she focused her energy on the final phase of her plan. A public reckoning that would strip away Dahlia's carefully cultivated facade and expose her misdeeds to the world. Liana knew that Dahlia's true Achilles' heel was her reputation, her status within the community, so she would strike at the very heart of Dahlia's pride, using the woman's own social ambitions against her. The pieces were falling into place, and as Liana put the finishing touches on her meticulously crafted scheme, she felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Dahlia had underestimated her, had mistaken her kindness for weakness. But Liana was done being the victim. It was time for the hunter to become the hunted, for the scales of justice to finally tip in her favor. And when the dust settled, Dahlia would learn a harsh lesson, that some debts can never be repaid, and that the price of deceit is always, inevitably, ruin. The night of Dahlia's lavish charity gala arrived, and Liana could barely contain her anticipation. Months of meticulous planning had led to this moment, the culmination of her quest for revenge against the woman who had so callously betrayed her trust. As she stepped out of the car, smoothing the fabric of her elegant gown, Liana surveyed the opulent mansion where the event was being held. Dahlia had truly outdone herself, sparing no expense to impress the who's who of their city's elite social circles. Liana plastered a polite smile on her face as she made her way through the crowd of well-heeled guests, sipping champagne and exchanging air kisses. She knew that beneath the veneer of wealth and sophistication, there lurked a darkness. A web of lies and deceit spun by Dahlia herself, and tonight she would unravel that web for all to see. As the evening wore on, Liana bided her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She watched as Dahlia held court, regaling her admirers with tales of her latest philanthropic endeavors, basking in the glow of their adulation. Finally, as the gala reached its crescendo, Liana caught the eye of the event's MC. With a subtle nod, she signaled that she was ready. The MC tapped his microphone, commanding the attention of the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special surprise for you tonight." Dahlia beamed, no doubt expecting some grand gesture in her honor, but as the MC continued, his words cut through the revelry like a knife. "It has come to our attention that one of our esteemed guests has been engaged in a pattern of deceit and financial fraud." A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned towards the stage. Evidence has been brought forward that Dahlia Margits has been opening credit cards and taking out loans in other people's names, racking up thousands of dollars in debt to fund her lavish lifestyle. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Dahlia's face contorted in a mixture of shock and fury. "This is outrageous," she shouted, rising from her seat. "How dare you make such slanderous accusations?" But the MC was undeterred. "The proof is indisputable, Dahlia. Bank statements, loan documents, all bearing your signature and the names of your victims." With a flick of his wrist, the MC projected the damning evidence onto a large screen behind him. Liana's eyes locked with Dahlia's, and she saw the realization dawning. This was no mere accusation, but a carefully orchestrated takedown. You did this," Dahlia hissed, pointing an accusatory finger at Liana. "You ungrateful little worm." Liana simply smiled, reveling in the delicious satisfaction of watching Dahlia's world crumble around her. As the MC continued to lay out the breadth of Dahlia's crimes, the guests erupted into a frenzy of whispers and speculation. Liana could see the looks of disgust and disbelief on their faces, the realization that they had been duped by Dahlia's false pretenses, and in that moment she knew she had won. Dahlia's precious reputation was in tatters, her social standing obliterated by the very scandal she had so carelessly courted. As security escorted a screaming, raging Dahlia from the premises, Liana stood tall, basking in the sweet taste of revenge. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, the emotional and financial abuse. She was free. And as she watched Dahlia's once charmed life unravel before her eyes, Liana knew that this was just the beginning. The reckoning had only just begun. In the aftermath of Dahlia's public humiliation, the dominoes began to fall. What had started as a revelation of financial fraud quickly spiraled into a full-blown investigation into Dahlia's business dealings and personal life. Reporters swarmed like vultures, desperate for any scrap of information about the once revered socialite's spectacular fall from grace. Liana found herself inundated with requests for interviews, but she remained steadfastly silent, content to let the facts speak for themselves. As the weeks passed, more and more skeletons tumbled from Dahlia's closet. Shady real estate transactions, questionable investments, even whispers of tax evasion. It seemed her entire life had been built on a foundation of lies and deception. Liana watched from the sidelines, a mixture of vindication and revulsion swirling within her. Part of her relished in Dahlia's downfall, the karmic retribution for the suffering she had endured. But another part of her couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the once mighty woman now reduced to a pariah. But her sympathy was fleeting, extinguished by the memory of Dahlia's callous disregard for her victims, her willingness to destroy lives in pursuit of her own selfish desires. As the legal proceedings against Dahlia dragged on, Liana found an unlikely ally in Reed. Despite his initial reluctance to accept his mother's true nature, the mounting evidence of her crimes had finally shattered his rose-colored illusions. "I'm sorry, Liana," he said one evening, his voice heavy with shame. "I should have believed you from the start." Liana regarded him coolly, uncertain if she was ready to forgive his complicity in Dahlia's schemes. "Better late than never, I suppose." Reed nodded, his gaze downcast. "I know I can never make up for what she did to you, for the pain she caused, but I want to try and make things right in whatever way I can." Liana considered his words, weighing the sincerity in his eyes against the lingering resentment in her heart. Finally she relented, recognizing that Reed, too, had been a victim of Dahlia's manipulation, blinded by his misguided loyalty. Together, they worked to untangle the web of Dahlia's financial misdeeds, tracing the paper trail of stolen funds and forged documents. With Reed's cooperation, Liana was able to recoup a portion of her lost savings and begin the arduous process of repairing her credit. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like a weight had been lifted from Liana's shoulders. She was reclaiming her life, piece by piece, and leaving the toxic legacy of Dahlia's betrayal behind. As for Dahlia herself, her fate was sealed. Convicted on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement, she faced a lengthy prison sentence and the prospect of financial ruin. The once untouchable doyenne of high society had been reduced to a cautionary tale, a reminder that no amount of wealth or status could shield one from the consequences of their actions. And as Liana watched the woman who had once held such power over her being led away in handcuffs, she felt a sense of closure wash over her. The nightmare was finally over, the debt of deceit paid in full. It was time to move on, to leave the ashes of Dahlia's ruination behind and forge a new path, one built on honesty, integrity, and the knowledge that justice, though often delayed, would always prevail in the end. As Dahlia's legal battles raged on, Liana found herself at a crossroads. The woman who had once held such power over her was now a mere shell, her influence reduced to a cautionary tale. Yet, even as Dahlia faced the consequences of her actions, Liana felt no sense of triumph. The wounds she had suffered, the betrayal, the financial ruin, the emotional turmoil, had left scars that would never fully heal. Especially when it came to Reed. Despite his efforts to make amends, to aid Liana in untangling the web of his mother's deceit, she couldn't shake the lingering resentment. How could she trust a man who had chosen his mother's lies over her truth time and time again? "I know I can never truly apologize enough for what happened," Reed said one evening, his eyes pleading with her to understand. "But I swear, Liana, I'm not that person anymore. I see my mother for who she really is now." Liana regarded him coolly, her expression impassive. "And who is that exactly? A master manipulator? A criminal? because for a long time you seemed perfectly content to enable her behavior, even as it was destroying my life. Reed flinched at her words, but Liana felt no satisfaction in inflicting pain. She was simply stating the facts, the harsh realities that had once been obscured by Dahlia's tangled web of deception. "I was blinded," Reed admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Blinded by my love for her, by the belief that she was acting in my best interests. It was a mistake, one that I'll have to live with for the rest of my life." Liana nodded, her jaw set in grim determination. "Yes, you will, because even though your mother was the architect of this nightmare, you were complicit in it. You chose her over me, time and again." Reed opened his mouth to protest, but Liana held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, Reed. I'm saying it because it's the truth. And if we have any hope of moving forward, of salvaging what's left of our relationship, we have to confront that truth head on." A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of their shared trauma palpable. Finally, Reed spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're right. You deserve better than what I gave you. And if you can't find it in your heart to forgive me, to trust me again, I'll understand." Liana felt a pang of sadness, a bittersweet acknowledgement that sometimes love simply wasn't enough to overcome the wounds of betrayal. She had loved Reed, truly and deeply, but Dahlia's poisonous influence had corroded that love from the inside out. In the end, Liana knew what she had to do. As much as it pained her, she had to let go. Of the relationship, of the dreams they had once shared, of the future they had so naively envisioned. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging within her. "Too much has happened, too much damage has been done. I need to focus on healing, on rebuilding my life without the specter of your mother's legacy hanging over me." Reed nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand, and I want you to know that I'll always regret the pain I caused you, the choices I made that led us to this point." Liana reached out, squeezing his hand gently. "I know, and for what it's worth, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means letting go." As she watched Reed walk away, a chapter of her life closing forever, Liana felt a sense of bittersweet relief. The road ahead would be long and arduous, the scars of Dahlia's betrayal never truly fading, but she was free from the lies, the manipulation, the toxic cycle of abuse that had nearly consumed her. And in that freedom, she found the strength to start anew, to forge a path guided by hard-won wisdom and an unwavering commitment to truth and justice. For Liana had learned a harsh lesson, one etched into her very soul, that the price of deceit was ultimately paid in the currency of shattered lives and broken dreams, and she vowed never again to be the one left holding the bill.
The letter arrived 3 days after we buried my father. Plain white envelope, my name written in his unmistakable architect's handwriting. I found it wedged between bills and junk mail, like it was trying to hide from the world. Just like Dad always did with the important stuff. My name is Avery, and until that moment, I thought I knew everything about my father. I was wrong. I stood in my tiny apartment kitchen, coffee growing cold beside me, staring at that envelope like it might disappear if I looked away. The morning sun caught the edge of the paper, making it glow against my trembling fingers. 3 days of crying had left me hollow, but somehow this letter brought everything rushing back. "Sweetheart," it began, "if you're reading this, then I couldn't find the courage to tell you in person. I'm sorry for that. But what I'm about to share with you needs to stay between us." The words blurred as tears welled up again. I blinked them away, determined to focus. My phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, just like I had been doing since the funeral. I couldn't handle another conversation about the appropriate way to grieve, or how Chloe was handling it so much better. Back to the letter. "There's something waiting for you at First National Bank, box 247. The key is taped to the back of this page. What you'll find there is yours alone. Not your mother's, not Chloe's. Just yours." I flipped the page over. A small silver key caught the light, secured with clear tape that had yellowed slightly with age. How long had he been planning this? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. "Hey babe, your mom's worried. Call her back." I texted back quickly, working on something. Talk later. The letter continued. I've watched you struggle to find your place, always putting everyone else first. You're so much stronger than you know, Avery. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone find their own way. The doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe, perfectly put together as always, probably sent by Mom to check on me. I stayed quiet until her heels clicked away down the hall. The guilt of avoiding her twisted in my stomach, but something told me Dad was right. This needed to stay private. The letter's final paragraph made my heart race. The choice of what to do with what you find will be yours alone. But remember this, you don't owe anyone your dreams. Not even family. Especially not family. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair, the letter trembling in my hands. Dad had always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper who smiled and nodded while Mom and Chloe dominated every conversation. But here, in these words, was a different man. Someone who saw more than he let on. My phone lit up again, a text from Ethan. Family dinner tonight at your mom's. Don't skip this one. Please? I stared at the message, then at the key in my hand. The bank would be open for another 3 hours. Family dinner wasn't until 7. I'll be there, I texted back. Standing up, I grabbed my coat and the letter, carefully folding it into my pocket. Whatever was in that safety deposit box, Dad wanted me to find it before facing the family. Before facing Mom's plans for moving forward, and Chloe's perfectly scripted grief and Ethan's well-meaning but suffocating concern. As I locked my apartment door, another text came through from Mom. We're something appropriate tonight. The Hendersons are coming. We need to show them we're handling this with dignity. I smiled grimly. First the bank, then dinner. And somewhere between those 2 points, I'd discover exactly what my quiet, observant father had been planning, and why he'd chosen to share it only with me. The Hendersons arrived at 7 sharp, dressed like they were attending a society fundraiser instead of a family dinner. I watched from the kitchen as Mom fussed over them in the foyer, her pearl necklace catching the light every time she laughed at their polite condolences. My trip to the bank was still burning in my mind, but I forced myself to focus on arranging the appetizer plates. Just act normal, I kept telling myself. But normal felt impossible after what I'd discovered. There you are. Chloe breezed into the kitchen, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Mom's been looking for you. Why aren't you dressed yet? I glanced down at my simple black pants and blouse. I am dressed. Oh, Avery. She sighed, reaching past me for the wine opener. You know what Mom means by dressed. The Henderson son is here. Jason? The investment banker. I'm dating Ethan, I reminded her, though lately, that fact felt more like a habit than a certainty. Right. Speaking of Ethan, he's been asking about Dad's will. Seems pretty interested in the details. My hands froze on the cheese plate. What details? Just everything. Chloe leaned against the counter, studying me. It's weird that Dad didn't leave anything specific to you, isn't it? I mean, you were always his favorite. Before I could respond, Mom swept in. Girls, what are you doing hiding in here? The Hendersons are waiting. She paused, frowning at my outfit. Avery, I specifically laid out that navy dress for you. I'm comfortable in this. Comfortable isn't the point. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. Jason Henderson manages their entire family trust. We need to make connections right now, not. She gestured vaguely at my clothes. Not what, Mom? Not grieve. Don't start, Chloe warned, but Mom was already building steam. Your father would want us to be practical. The house, the lifestyle he worked so hard to provide, it all depends on maintaining certain relationships. Chloe understands this. Of course she does, I muttered. The doorbell rang again. Ethan's voice carried from the foyer, charming as ever. I heard him complimenting Mrs. Henderson's dress, and something in his tone made my skin crawl. I'll get the rest of the appetizers, I said, needing a moment alone. But as I reached for the fridge, I overheard Mom whisper to Chloe, the mortgage payment is due next week. Your father's life insurance is tied up in probate. We need the Hendersons' goodwill more than ever. My hand tightened on the fridge handle. Dad's letter suddenly made more sense. He must have known about the financial troubles, known Mom would try to maintain appearances at any cost. Avery? Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking perfectly at ease in his tailored suit. Need help? I've got it. He stepped closer anyway, lowering his voice. Your mom's worried about you. We all are. You've been distant since the funeral. I'm fine. Are you? Because Chloe mentioned you've been asking questions about your dad's finances. I set down the plate harder than necessary. Why are you and Chloe discussing me? We care about you. His hand touched my waist, but it felt wrong somehow. Maybe if you talk to me about what's bothering you. Avery, Mom called from the dining room. The Hendersons are asking about your work at the community center. I stepped away from Ethan, grateful for the interruption. But as I headed for the dining room, I caught a glimpse of him and Chloe exchanging a look that made my stomach turn. The safety deposit box key felt heavy in my pocket. Dad's words echoed in my head. You don't owe anyone your dreams. Looking at the perfectly arranged dining room. At Mom's desperate smile and Chloe's calculated charm, I finally understood what he meant. This wasn't just about money. It was about escape. So, Avery, Mrs. Henderson smiled benevolently. Tell us about your little charity work. I sat down, aware of all the eyes on me, each person wanting something different. Mom wanted a performance. Chloe wanted ammunition. Ethan wanted. Well, that was becoming clearer by the minute. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what any of them wanted. The safety deposit box felt heavier than it should have as I placed it on the small table in the bank's private viewing room. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key, Dad's words from dinner 2 weeks ago echoing in my mind. Sometimes the quiet ones see everything. Sweetheart. Inside lay a thick manila envelope and a smaller white one with my name on it. I opened the white one first. My dear Avery, it began, by now you've probably noticed what's happening at home. Your mother's desperate social climbing, Chloe's increasing entitlement, and that boyfriend of yours asking all the wrong questions. My throat tightened. Even from beyond the grave, Dad saw right through everyone. The manila envelope contained bank statements, property deeds, and finally, a cashier's check that made my hands shake. $2 million. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. Everything okay in there, Miss Thompson? The bank manager knocked softly. Yes, fine, I called back, quickly stuffing the check into my purse. My phone buzzed. Ethan again. 3 missed calls since this morning. I silenced it and returned to Dad's letter. This money comes from my personal accounts, built up over years of careful planning. Your mother never knew about it. Neither did Chloe. I watched them both become something I never wanted for you, people who measure their worth by others' approval. The door opened suddenly. I scrambled to hide the papers, but it was too late. Chloe stood there, her perfect makeup not quite hiding her rage. I knew it, she hissed. I followed you here after I saw the bank's number on your phone last night. This is a private room, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Private? Like how Dad privately set you up while leaving the rest of us to drown. She stepped closer, eyes fixed on the papers in my hands. Mom's about to lose everything and you're here hoarding secrets? It's not what you think. Really? Because I think Dad played favorites right until the end. Perfect Avery, the one who understood him. She spat the words. While I got stuck managing Mom's breakdowns and trying to hold everything together. Hold everything together? Is that what you call flirting with my boyfriend? Chloe's face flickered with something. Guilt? Fear? Before hardening again. I don't know what you're talking about. I saw you two at dinner last night. The looks, the whispers. How long has it been going on? This isn't about Ethan. She reached for the papers. This is about family. I pulled them away, Dad's words burning in my mind. You don't owe anyone your dreams. You're right, I said. This is about family. About how you and Mom turned it into a competition. About how Dad saw it happening and tried to protect at least one of us from becoming like that. Protect? Chloe laughed bitterly. By hiding money? By lying? By giving me a choice. The bank manager appeared in the doorway. Is everything all right, ladies? Fine, we said in unison, a lifetime of keeping up appearances kicking in automatically. Show me what's in those papers, Chloe demanded once he left, or I'll tell Mom everything. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the perfect facade, I saw something familiar, the same trapped feeling I'd been fighting all my life. You know what? Tell her. Tell everyone. Because I'm done pretending everything's fine when it's not. I gathered the papers and stood up. Chloe grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging in. You can't just walk away. We're family. Yes, I said, gently removing her hand. And maybe that's the problem. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Ethan. We need to talk about your sister. I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. Dad had seen it all coming, the desperation, the betrayals, the choices I'd have to make. He hadn't just left me money, he'd left me an escape route. I typed back a single word. Yes. It was time to stop being the quiet one who saw everything. It was time to be the one who did something about it. I met Ethan at our usual coffee shop, the one where we had our first date 2 years ago. He was already there, 2 cups on the table, mine with extra cream, just how I liked it. The perfect boyfriend move. Too perfect. We need to talk about what happened at the bank, he said as I sat down. Interesting. I thought we needed to talk about my sister. His fingers tightened around his cup. Chloe's worried about you. We all are. Are you sleeping with her? The question hung there, sharp and ugly. Ethan's face did something complicated. Surprise, guilt, calculation, all in quick succession. That's not. This isn't about me and Chloe. He leaned forward. Your father left you money, didn't he? A lot of it. I thought about Dad's letter, about his quiet observations over the years. Had he seen this coming too? Your mother's about to lose everything, Ethan continued. The house, the social standing, all of it. You could help. Like you've been helping Chloe? He had the grace to flinch. Look, things got complicated. Chloe was vulnerable after your father died. Don't. My voice was steady, surprising even me. Don't you dare use my father's death as an excuse. A text lit up my phone. Mom, the bank called about the mortgage. Where are you? I switched it to silent as Ethan reached across the table. We can fix this, Avery. All of it. Just tell me about the money. Let me help you figure out what to do with it. The same words he'd used when I got my promotion last year. When I inherited my grandmother's jewelry. Always offering to help manage my resources. There's nothing to figure out, I said, standing up. It's already decided. Avery, wait, he grabbed my wrist. Too tight. You're not thinking clearly. Your father's death, the stress. Let me handle this. A memory surfaced. Dad at my college graduation, quietly slipping me extra cash while Mom fussed over Chloe's outfit. You've got good instincts, sweetheart, he'd said. Trust them. I pulled my arm free. How long? What? How long have you and Chloe been planning this? Was it before or after Dad died? His silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed again, Chloe this time. Mom's hysterical. If you have money, you need to help. It's what Dad would want. But that wasn't true, was it? Dad had spent years watching, planning, making sure at least one of us had a chance to break free. I loved you, I said to Ethan. Did that matter at all? He stood too, switching tactics. Of course it did. It does. But families stick together, right? Your mom needs help, Chloe needs support, and you. You need guidance. Let me be there for all of you. The pieces clicked into place. They'd planned it perfectly, Ethan keeping me close while Chloe worked on Mom, all of them waiting to see what Dad might have left behind. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Here's your guidance. Inside were photos from my phone, screenshots of texts between him and Chloe going back months, pictures of their secret meetings that weren't so secret after all. I'm not the quiet one anymore, I said, watching his face pale. Dad taught me better than that. As I walked out, another text came through from Mom's bank. They were reviewing Dad's accounts, looking for hidden assets. They needed to speak with all family members. Time was running out. I had to decide, use Dad's money to save a family that never really wanted me, or honor his last wish and save myself. I thought about the community center where I volunteered, about the dreams I'd put on hold to play the dutiful daughter. About Dad, watching it all, planning an escape route. My phone buzzed one last time. Chloe, don't make me tell Mom everything. I smiled, thinking of the evidence safely backed up in 3 different places. Go ahead, I typed back. I've got some things to tell her too. I was packing the last of my office things when Chloe stormed in, waving her phone like a weapon. Behind her, Ethan lingered in the doorway, trying to look concerned instead of calculating. You're quitting your job? Chloe's voice carried down the hallway. Are you insane? I continued wrapping my desk photos in newspaper. Close the door. She slammed it instead, making the blinds rattle. Mom's having a breakdown. The bank is threatening foreclosure and you're what, running away? Interesting how you found out so quickly. I glanced at Ethan. Almost like someone's been monitoring my emails. He had the decency to look away, but Chloe stepped closer, her designer heels clicking on the tile floor. You have $2 million, Avery. $2 million that could save our family, and you're choosing to abandon us. My hand stilled on Dad's old paperweight. How do you know the exact amount? The silence was deafening. Chloe's face flushed, and Ethan shifted uncomfortably. You went through my apartment. The realization hit like a punch. While I was at the coffee shop with Ethan. That's why he insisted on meeting there. We had to know, Ethan started, but I cut him off. Had to know what? How much I was worth betraying. That's not fair, Chloe's voice cracked. You don't understand what Mom's going through. What I'm going through. Dad left us with nothing but debt and secrets. Did you even look for his letter in my apartment? The one explaining why he did this? I watched their faces. No, of course not. You just wanted the numbers. My phone buzzed. Mom again. I ignored it. Whatever Dad's reasons, Ethan stepped forward, playing mediator. The reality is your family needs help. You have the means to provide it. Isn't that what matters? I pulled out my laptop, typing quickly. You're right. Family does matter. Finally, Chloe sighed. So you'll help? Oh, I'm helping. I turned the screen toward them. On it were dozens of screenshots, their secret meetings, text messages, bank records showing suspicious transfers from Mom's accounts to Chloe's private one. What are you doing? Ethan's voice lost its smooth edge. Sending copies to Mom, the family lawyer, and the bank's fraud department. My finger hovered over the enter key. Unless you want to tell me the truth. All of it. Chloe's facade cracked. We needed money for Mom's gambling debts. Dad knew, but he wouldn't help. He just kept saying we needed to face consequences and learn responsibility. So you decided to take responsibility by stealing from Mom's accounts and setting up your boyfriend to spy on me? He wasn't supposed to fall for you, Chloe whispered. It was just supposed to be a way to find out about Dad's assets. The words hit harder than I expected. 2 years of my life, all a calculation. Avery, Ethan reached for me. It started that way, but... Save it. I pressed enter. The bank will figure out the truth about Mom's missing money. And you too can explain to her why her golden daughter has been bleeding her accounts dry. You bitch, Chloe lunged forward, but Ethan caught her arm. You're destroying everything. No, I picked up my box of belongings. Dad saw this coming. The manipulation, the lies, all of it. He wasn't punishing you. He was protecting me. As I walked out, Chloe called after me. Mom will never forgive you for this. I thought about Dad's letter, safely stored away. Sometimes love means letting people face their own choices, sweetheart. Even when those choices hurt. My phone buzzed again. A text from the community center where I volunteered. Still interested in that full-time position? Yes, I typed back, stepping into the elevator. And I'd like to discuss expanding our programs. I suddenly have some investment capital to work with. Behind me, I could hear Chloe crying and Ethan trying to damage control. But for the first time since Dad died, I felt light. Free. Sometimes the quiet ones don't just see everything, they change everything. The family home looked different in the rain, smaller somehow. I sat in my car, watching Mom pace behind the living room windows, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling her society friends, trying to explain why her accounts were suddenly frozen. My phone lit up, the bank's fraud department again. I'd have to deal with them eventually, but right now, I had to face something worse. Sunday dinner. The moment I stepped inside, I knew Chloe had already arrived. Her designer coat hung in its usual spot, dripping onto Mom's precious hardwood floors. In the dining room, voices carried. "We can fix this," Ethan was saying. "The bank just needs—" "Shut up," Chloe snapped. "This is all your fault. If you'd done your job properly." I rounded the corner. The room fell silent. Mom stood at the head of the table, clutching a stack of papers, printouts of the evidence I'd sent. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steel. "Sit down, Avery." I took Dad's old seat. No one had used it since the funeral. "Explain this." Mom slapped the papers down. "Explain why my daughter has been stealing from me while my other daughter hid millions." I think Chloe should explain first. I met my sister's eyes. About the gambling debts. About using Ethan to spy on me. About all of it. "You self-righteous bitch," Chloe's mascara was already running. "You have no idea what it's been like, watching you play the perfect daughter while Mom fell apart." "Perfect?" I laughed. "I was invisible. Until you needed something to steal." "Enough." Mom's hand slammed the table. "The bank is investigating both of you. Our name will be ruined. Everything your father built." Dad knew. The words stopped her cold. He knew about the gambling, the debt, all of it. That's why he protected the money from you. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "There might be a way to fix this. If Avery turns over the inheritance, we could settle with the bank quietly. Keep everything private." "You mean keep your involvement private," I corrected. "I loved you," he said softly. "That part wasn't a lie. Just everything else?" Mom sank into her chair. $2 million. All this time, while I've been drowning in debt. "Your debt," I reminded her. "Your choices." "Our choices," Chloe countered. "We're family. We're supposed to help each other. Like you helped yourself to Mom's accounts?" "At least I stayed." Chloe shot back. "I didn't abandon her like you're doing." Mom looked up, suddenly sharp. "Is that true? Are you leaving?" I thought of the community center job offer, the chance to start fresh. "Yes." "Then you're no daughter of mine." Mom's voice was quiet, final. "If you walk away now, don't come back." The words should have hurt more. Instead, they felt like freedom. I stood up. Dad left one more letter. "Would you like to know what it said?" Nobody moved. He wrote that love isn't about enabling destructive behavior. It's about having the courage to let people face their own choices. I pulled out my phone, showing them the bank app. "So here's my choice." With a few taps, I transferred enough money to cover Mom's legitimate debts. Not the gambling ones, not the secret credit cards. Just the mortgage and basic bills. "That's all you get," I said. "The rest goes where Dad intended, to someone who'll use it to help others, not enable more lies." "You can't do this," Chloe whispered. "I already have." I headed for the door, then turned back one last time. "Dad saw all of this coming. He saw you using me, using him, using each other. And he made sure at least one of us would break free." "Avery, wait." Mom called, but I was already walking out into the rain. My phone buzzed. "The community center director, when can you start?" Through my tears, I smiled. "Tomorrow," I typed back. "I'm ready to begin." Behind me, the family home grew smaller in my rearview mirror, its windows dark with secrets I no longer had to keep. The community center's windows glowed warm against the twilight as I finished unpacking my new office. 1 week since I'd walked away from my family, and already the world felt different. Clearer. A knock at the door made me freeze. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. "The security guard let me in," he said. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. Your mother's in the hospital." The words hit like a slap. "Anxiety attack. Chloe found her unconscious this morning." I gripped the edge of my desk. "Why are you here, Ethan?" "Because I can fix this." He stepped closer. "The bank's investigation, your family's reputation, all of it. I have connections. Like the connections you used to spy on me? That was different. I didn't know you then." His voice softened. "I didn't know I'd fall in love with you." "You mean you didn't know Dad would leave me the money?" A flicker crossed his face, There it was, the truth behind the mask. "It's not that simple," he started, but another voice cut him off. "Actually, it is." Mom stood in the doorway, Chloe beside her. She looked smaller somehow, her designer outfit wrinkled, her makeup imperfect. "You're supposed to be in the hospital," I said. I checked myself out. Mom stepped into the office. I needed to see what was so important that my daughter would abandon her family for it. I gestured around the room. "This is what Dad believed in. Helping people break free from toxic situations. Like the one you created." "I created?" Mom laughed bitterly. "Your father kept secrets. He played favorites. He saw everything." I cut in. "The gambling, the lies, how you and Chloe manipulated everyone around you. He saw it all, and he made sure I'd see it too." Chloe moved to stand beside Ethan. "We can still fix this. Together. As a family." "Family?" I pulled out my phone, playing a recording, Ethan's voice discussing their plan to access Dad's accounts. Chloe agreeing to use their relationship to manipulate me. "Is this your idea of family?" Mom's face went white. Chloe stepped forward, reaching for the phone, but I held up my hand. "The bank already has copies. So does the district attorney." I met each of their eyes in turn. "It's over." "You'd send your own sister to jail?" Mom whispered. "No, but I won't protect her from her choices anymore." I turned to Ethan. "Any of you." He moved suddenly, grabbing my arm. "You don't understand what you're doing. The people I work with, the money involved. Let her go." The new voice made us all turn. Sarah, one of our center's clients, stood in the doorway with 2 police officers. I called them when I saw them come in. "You okay, Avery?" Ethan released me, stepping back as the officers entered. "This is what Dad wanted," I said, watching their faces crumble. "Not revenge. Not punishment. Just truth. The chance to build something honest from the ashes of all your lies." "Miss Thompson." One officer stepped forward. "We need to ask you some questions about the financial fraud complaint you filed." Mom sank into a chair, all pretense gone. "Everything we did." "I thought I was protecting our family." "No," I said softly. "You were protecting your image of what family should be. Dad protected me by showing me what family could be." As the officers led Ethan away, Chloe crying beside our shell-shocked mother, I looked around the center. At the women we'd help, the lives we'd change. At the legacy Dad had really left, not money, but the courage to break free. "Miss Thompson." Sarah lingered in the doorway. "The evening group is waiting. Should I tell them we're canceling?" I straightened my desk, smoothed my shirt. "No. Tell them we're just getting started." Behind me, Mom and Chloe watched in silence as I walked away, finally understanding what Dad had known all along. Sometimes love means letting go. 1 year later, I stood in front of the community center's newly expanded wing, watching as workers installed the dedication plaque. The Robert Thompson Memorial Center for New Beginnings. The morning sun caught the brass letters, making them glow like Dad's smile used to. Sarah appeared beside me, clipboard in hand. "The first group of residents moves in next week. We've already got a waiting list for the transitional housing program." "Dad would have loved this," I said, touching the plaque. "Using his money to help people start over." Speaking of starting over. Sarah nodded toward the parking lot. Chloe stood there, looking different than I remembered. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup. Just my sister, wearing jeans and uncertainty. "Hey," she said, stepping closer. "Nice plaque." "Thanks. How's the community service going?" "Almost done. The counseling too." She shifted, uncomfortable. "Mom's doing better. The gambling addiction program. It's helping." I nodded, remembering the plea deal they'd both taken. Ethan hadn't been so lucky. His connections had turned out to be far more interested in saving themselves than him. "I saw your interview," Chloe continued, "about the center's mission. Helping women escape toxic relationships, find their strength." She paused. It reminded me of Dad's letters. "You found them?" Mom had them. All of them. He wrote to her too, trying to help her see what she was doing to us. To herself. Chloe's voice cracked. "She never opened them until after the trial." Sarah touched my arm. I'll check on the contractors, she said, leaving us alone. I'm not ready to forgive everything, I said quietly. I know. I'm not asking for that. Chloe pulled something from her bag, a familiar envelope. But I found this in Mom's things. It's addressed to both of us from Dad. I haven't opened it. My hands shook slightly as I took it. Inside was a single photograph, Chloe and me as kids, laughing on a swing set, Dad pushing us both. Turn it over, Chloe whispered. Dad's handwriting covered the back. My girls, remember this moment. Before expectations, before competition, before fear drove you apart. Love isn't about keeping score. It's about pushing each other toward joy. He knew we'd end up here, I realized. Not just me breaking free, but you too. Eventually. I have an interview next week, Chloe said. With a domestic violence shelter. They need administrative help and with my community service experience. You're staying in social services? She smiled slightly. Turns out helping people feels better than manipulating them. Who knew? A group of women emerged from the center, heading to their life skills class. They walked tall, confident, free. Just like Dad always wanted for us. We're starting a new support group, I said. Family trauma and recovery. Tuesday nights. Chloe's eyes met mine. Yeah, if you're interested. I'll think about it. She turned to leave, then stopped. Avery, that day in your office, when everything fell apart. You could have destroyed us completely, but you didn't. That's not what Dad taught me about strength. She nodded, understanding finally crossing her face. I'll see you Tuesday. I watched her walk away, different now from the sister who'd helped tear our family apart. Not healed, not forgiven, but changing. Like all of us. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Saw the center's write-up in the paper. Robert would be proud. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Some bridges take longer to rebuild than others. Inside my office, Dad's last letter sat framed on my desk. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting people find their own way back to themselves. Sarah knocked, smiling. Ready? The new group's waiting. I touched the photograph in my pocket, feeling its edges, sharp but softening with time, like all the best truths do. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. Behind me, the plaque caught the sunlight again, casting warm shadows across the floor. Ahead, voices filled the center with new stories, new beginnings, new chances at joy. Just like Dad always knew they would.
I stood there frozen, as the words I had just overheard replayed in my mind like a broken record. Dean's voice, usually so warm and comforting, now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Hey, Elise, I can't wait to see you later tonight. Who was Elise? And why did his tone sound so intimate, so suggestive? A wave of nausea washed over me as the pieces started to come together. Dean emerged from the study, his expression shifting from casual to panicked when he saw me standing there. Mira, honey, you're back early. How long have you been there? I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Long enough, I managed to choke out. Who is Elise? He paled, his eyes darting away from mine. It's not what you think, he began, but I cut him off. Don't insult me, Dean. I heard the way you spoke to her, the way you sounded. I trailed off, the implications too painful to voice. Desperation crept into his voice as he stepped toward me, hands outstretched. Mira, please, let me explain. But I had heard enough. Without a word, I turned and walked out the door, my mind reeling. How could the man I was supposed to marry in just a few short weeks be having an affair? The man my own brother had vouched for, insisting he was a perfect match for me? As I drove aimlessly, hot tears streamed down my cheeks. I had always prided myself on being a strong, independent woman, but in that moment I felt utterly betrayed and alone. The future I had so carefully planned lay in tatters around me. But then something shifted inside me. A fire ignited, fueled by anger and a newfound determination. I would not be the victim in this story. Dean had made his choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. I wiped away my tears and took a deep breath. This was not the end, but the beginning of something new. A chance to reclaim my power and show the world, and Dean, just how strong I really was. After that fateful day, I tried to act normal around Dean, but it was almost impossible. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had betrayed my trust in the most despicable way. Still, I knew I had to keep up appearances until the pre-wedding celebration I had planned. That was when I would expose his lies in front of everyone. "Hey, babe," Dean said one evening as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, his voice dripping with false affection. "Is everything okay? You've seemed a little off lately." I forced a smile, fighting back the surge of anger that threatened to spill over. "Of course, everything's fine. Just a bit stressed with all the wedding prep, that's all." He reached across the table and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Don't worry, it'll all be worth it in the end. I can't wait to make you my wife." The words made me feel physically ill. How dare he act so caring and loving when he was sneaking around with that Elise woman behind my back? Later that night, as Dean was getting ready for bed, his phone pinged with a new message notification. Before he could check it, I snatched it up, my heart pounding. "Hey, that's private," he protested, trying to grab it from me. But I had already seen enough. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you tonight, handsome." I looked up at him, fury blazing in my eyes. "So who's Elise again? Just a work friend, right?" Dean's face turned ashen. "Mira, I can explain." "Save it," I spat, throwing his phone back at him. "I'm done with your lies and excuses." He reached for me, desperation etched on his features. "Please, baby, let's talk about this." But I was already storming out of the room, not wanting to be anywhere near him a moment longer. How could I have been so blind? So naive? I had always prided myself on being a strong, independent woman who didn't need a man to be happy. But Dean had wormed his way into my life, charming me with his smooth words and good looks, making me believe that he was different, that we were meant to be together. Well, no more. From that moment on, I vowed that I would be the one calling the shots. Dean's days of playing me for a fool were over. He wanted to see just how strong I could be. He was about to find out. After my confrontation with Dean, I knew I needed proof of his affair if I was going to expose him at the pre-wedding celebration. So I did what any good event planner would do. I gathered intel. Using some discreet tracking tricks I'd picked up over the years, I followed Dean one night when he claimed to be going to a work dinner. Sure enough, he ended up at a fancy restaurant downtown, waiting at the bar area. A few minutes later, a tall, slender woman with long blonde hair walked in and greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. My blood boiled as I watched them being seated at a cozy corner table, their heads leaning in close as they talked and laughed intimately. This had to be Elise, the woman Dean had been carrying on with behind my back. I considered bursting in and confronting them right then and there, but I held back. I needed to keep my cool if I was going to pull off my big reveal at the party. So I gritted my teeth and watched as Dean and his mistress carried on their sickening charade over a candlelit dinner, feeding each other bites of food and giggling like love-struck teenagers. Finally, they paid the check and left. Walking hand in hand to Dean's car, I followed at a safe distance until they pulled up to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. I felt like vomiting as I realized what was happening, but I forced myself to stay and wait it out. Hours later, Dean finally emerged alone, looking thoroughly disheveled. I tailed him until I was certain he was heading home before breaking off and returning to my own place, my mind racing. The next morning, Dean acted as if nothing had happened, greeting me with a kiss and asking what I wanted for breakfast. I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming at him, from unleashing all the pent-up rage and disgust I felt. "Actually, I was thinking we could go out," I said with forced cheerfulness, "to celebrate the upcoming wedding and all." His eyes lit up, the fool. "That's a great idea, babe. Where did you want to go?" I gave him a sly smile. "Oh, I have the perfect place in mind." As we headed out later that night, I led Dean to the same seedy motel where I had seen him the night before with Elise. He furrowed his brow in confusion as we pulled into the parking lot. Mira, what are we doing here?" I turned to face him, letting my mask of calm finally drop. "Cut the crap, Dean. I know all about your little tryst with Elise last night at this very place." His face drained of color. "What? How? Did you really think you could cheat on me and get away with it?" I snarled, no longer able to contain my fury. "Well, the game is up. I have proof of everything, and at our little pre-wedding party, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of lying, cheating scumbag you really are." Dean opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He simply stared at me with a mixture of shock, fear, and something else I couldn't quite place. "That's right," I said coldly. "This is just the beginning. Get ready to reap what you've sown, you miserable piece of filth." I got out of the car and stormed off, leaving Dean sitting there stunned. From that moment on, my life would be about one thing: making him pay. With the proof of Dean's infidelity burning a hole in my mind, I threw myself into planning the pre-wedding celebration where I would expose him. I wanted every detail to be perfect, from the venue to the guest list to the moment I would humiliate him in front of all our friends and family. "This is going to be an event no one will ever forget," I mumbled to myself as I pored over the seating arrangements. I had requested a small stage area to make sure all eyes would be on me when I dropped my bombshell. Dean tried acting nonchalant in the days leading up to the party, as if nothing was amiss. "Can't wait to celebrate our love with everyone," he'd say with a sickening grin, putting his arm around me. I wanted to scream, to unleash all my pent-up rage right then and there. But I kept my cool, responding with cold indifference. It's going to be a night to remember, all right." The morning of the party, Dean seemed to finally sense that something was off with me. "Babe, are you okay? You've been acting kinda weird lately." I fixed him with an icy glare. "I'm just fine, Dean. Don't worry about me." He opened his mouth, maybe to try and apologize or make an excuse, but I cut him off. "Save it. You'll get what's coming to you soon enough." Dean blinked in confusion, but didn't push it further. Little did he know, his whole world was about to come crashing down around him. That evening, I greeted our guests with a bright smile, acting the part of the blushing soon-to-be bride. Inside, though, I was anxiously going over my plan one last time in my head. As the party reached its peak, I caught Dean's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the stage area. He furrowed his brow but came over obligingly, probably expecting some sappy toast or speech. Instead, I took the microphone and launched right in without preamble. "Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here to celebrate Dean and I's upcoming marriage." I paused, locking eyes with Dean, who looked slightly puzzled. Except there isn't going to be a marriage after all. At least not for Dean and I. The room went dead silent as gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dean's face drained of color. "You see, Dean here has been lying to us all," I continued, my voice steady and carrying clearly. "While he's been putting on a charade as a devoted husband-to-be, he's actually been carrying on an affair with a woman named Elise." More gasps and shocked whispers. Dean frantically shook his head, eyes wide with panic. But I was just getting started. "That's right, I have proof that Dean has been sneaking around, meeting up with Elise at cheap motels to carry out their sordid little trysts." I pulled out my phone, and the damning photos I had taken spilled up on the projector screen. A shocked hush fell over the room as everyone took in the incriminating evidence. Photos of Dean and the blonde woman entering and leaving the motel, time-stamped and everything. I turned back to Dean, reveling in the look of sheer terror and shame on his face. "Well, Dean, anything to say for yourself?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish. In that moment, I felt a surge of pure, vindictive satisfaction. He was finally getting exactly what he deserved. The night before the big pre-wedding party, I could hardly sleep a wink. My mind raced with a million thoughts and emotions, anger, hurt, but also a growing sense of power and determination. I spent hours going over every detail of my plan to expose Dean's betrayal. I practiced my lines, envisioning the shocked looks on everyone's faces when the truth finally came out. Part of me still couldn't believe this was all happening, that the man I had planned to marry had been lying and cheating on me this whole time. But the bigger part of me, the part that had awoken with a newfound strength and resilience, knew I was doing the right thing. Dean had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. No more games, no more lies, just the harsh light of truth, burning away all his deceptions. I thought about the looks of disgust and contempt his friends and colleagues would give him once they saw the photos of his tawdry motel rendezvous. How his professional reputation would likely take a major hit when word spread about his infidelity. A small, vengeful part of me relished the idea of his world crumbling down around him. Of course, my own life would be impacted too, the wedding I had spent months planning, now canceled. The apartment we had just moved into together, which I would likely have to leave. The humiliation of being the scorned bride-to-be that everyone gossiped about. But you know what? I didn't care anymore. In fact, I felt liberated. Free from the weight of Dean's lies and deception. Free to start over, to rediscover who I was without him. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I got up and started getting ready, running through my mental checklist one last time. I laid out the photos and gathered up any remaining evidence, making sure it was all ready to present. My hands were shaking slightly as I applied my makeup and slipped into my dress. Not from nerves, but from a strange, thrilling sense of adrenaline. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, when I would finally regain control and make Dean pay for everything. I took one last look in the mirror, studying my own piercing gaze. "You've got this, Mira," I told my reflection firmly. "It's time to show the world exactly who you are." With that, I squared my shoulders and headed out, ready to bring the entire charade crashing down once and for all. Dean was about to learn an important lesson. You don't mess with a woman scorned. When I arrived at the venue, everything was already set up perfectly. Guests were milling about, sipping drinks and chatting excitedly. They had no idea what storm was about to hit. Dean spotted me from across the room and started towards me, his usual charming smile plastered across his stupidly handsome face. "There's my beautiful bride-to-be," he called out jovially. I felt a surge of disgust, but managed a saccharine smile in return. "Hey yourself, honey. Having a good time?" "Of course," he replied breezily. "Our big day is finally here." I almost wanted to laugh at the blatant irony of his words, if only he knew just how wrong he was. It's going to be a night to remember for sure," I said smoothly, reveling in the subtle way his smile faltered at my cryptic tone. "Why don't you head up to the stage area? I've got a little surprise planned." "Oh, okay," he stammered, that first flicker of uncertainty igniting in his eyes. "Good." He was starting to catch on that something was very, very off. With Dean in position, I grabbed the microphone and signaled for everyone's attention. Showtime. As I stood on the small stage, microphone in hand, the room fell into an anticipatory hush. All eyes were on me, filled with a mix of excitement and confusion. Dean stood beside me, shifting nervously from foot to foot, like he could sense the storm that was about to be unleashed. I took a deep, steadying breath and launched right in. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Dean and I's upcoming marriage," I began, my voice ringing out loud and clear. A few cheers and whoops sounded from the crowd. I let that hang in the air for a beat before continuing. "Except, there isn't going to be a wedding after all." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Dean's head snapped towards me, his eyes widening in shock and panic. I fixed him with a steely gaze, not breaking eye contact. "You see, Dean here has been lying to every single one of us this whole time," I said, my words dropping like lead weights. "While putting on a charade as a loving fiancé, he's actually been carrying on an affair with another woman." The room erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief, cries of outrage, a chorus of shock and anger. Dean opened his mouth, maybe to try and deny it, but I kept going before he could get a word out. "That's right," I said, louder, to rise above the din. "Dean has been sneaking around behind my back, meeting up with his mistress at cheap motels for their little trysts." With a few taps on my phone, the damning evidence lit up the screen behind us. Photos of Dean entering and leaving the motel with the mystery blonde woman, time-stamped and everything. Undeniable proof of his deception. A deafening silence fell over the crowd as everyone took in the incriminating images. Dean's face had drained of all color, his expression one of abject horror and shame. I turned back to address him directly. "Well, Dean, I'm sure everyone here would love to hear you explain yourself. Who is this woman you've been so intimately involved with behind my back?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, his eyes wild and desperate as he looked around at all the accusatory glares fixed on him. In that moment, I felt a twisted sense of power and satisfaction. The tables had well and truly turned. "Funny, suddenly you don't have much to say, huh?" I said with a mocking edge. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just speechless now that everyone can see what a lying, cheating scumbag you really are?" Dean flinched like I had physically struck him. Good. I wanted that blow to sting. wanted him to feel just an ounce of the hurt and humiliation he had put me through with his abhorrent betrayal. I can explain, he finally choked out, his voice barely above a tremulous whisper. A harsh peal of laughter ripped from my throat. Oh, I can't wait to hear this. Please, Dean, by all means explain to all of us how you could do this. How you could look me in the eye every single day while lying and cheating on me. Go on, I'm all ears. The silence that met my challenge was deafening. Dean seemed to shrink in on himself under the weight of all the hateful stares. In that moment, I felt a powerful sense of victory wash over me. The truth was laid bare, his carefully constructed facade of lies shattered beyond repair. There would be no coming back from this, no way for him to worm his way out with his usual smooth talking. As I drank in the look of utter desolation on his face, I felt something miraculous. The hurt, the anger, the feelings of betrayal that had been poisoning me for so long, they all just melted away. Replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom and lightness, this was the fresh start I had been craving. With one fateful purge of truth, I had lanced the festering boil of Dean's deceit from my life, letting all the darkness and toxicity bleed out. I was free to begin again, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of that disastrous relationship, and in that moment, nothing had ever felt more liberating. The silence that followed my explosive reveal was deafening. Dean looked like a deer caught in the headlights, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly as he floundered for an explanation. Finally, he seemed to find his voice. Mira, baby, I can explain, he stammered out, his eyes pleading. I scoffed loudly. Oh, this ought to be good. Go ahead, explain to all of us how you could betray me like this, how you could cheat and lie right to my face while I was busy planning our wedding. Dean's gaze darted around at all the accusing stares piercing into him. A bead of sweat trickled down his brow. It wasn't like that, he said weakly. Elise and we just got carried away one time and... One time? I cut him off with a harsh bark of laughter. The photos I have are from multiple nights, Dean. Multiple nights you snuck off to some cheap motel to get your rocks off with your little side piece. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd at my blunt words. Dean flushed red, shrinking in on himself. She doesn't mean anything to me, he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. It was just physical, baby. You're the one I really love. The crowd erupted in outraged shouts and cries at his pathetic attempt at an excuse. I held up a hand for silence, letting the anger and derision hang heavy in the air. Is that really the best you can come up with? I asked coolly once it quieted down. Some lame line about it just being physical? As if that makes it any better? Dean opened his mouth, but I cut him off again. No, let me guess, Elise was just using you to try and get ahead at work, right? Taking advantage of your status and position? Is that the story you're going to spin? His eyes went wide as I exposed the likely excuse he had been gearing up to deploy. How did you... I laughed again, a harsh, biting sound. Please, Dean. I know your type, charming on the surface but rotten at the core. A sneaky, selfish snake who only cares about one thing, your own pleasure and ego. Elise herself suddenly spoke up from somewhere in the crowd. That's not true, she cried, a defensive whine in her voice. Dean told me he was going to leave you, that you two were already over. A stunned silence fell over the room as all eyes swiveled to locate the source of the interjection. Elise shrank back as I fixed her with a withering glare. Of course he did, I said with heavy sarcasm. I'm sure that's just what every slimy cheater tells their side piece to justify their shitty behavior. I turned back to Dean, who looked utterly stricken, beads of sweat rolling down his crimson face. Well, anything else you'd like to add? Any other sad little excuses you want to trot out to try and save face? He said nothing, just stared down at his feet, shoulders slumped in defeat and shame. I drank in the sight of his misery, allowing it to really sink in. That's what I thought, I said with finality. You've shown your true colors, Dean, and they're pretty damn ugly. With that, I turned and started to walk away, leaving him alone and disgraced on the stage. But I couldn't resist one final parting shot over my shoulder. I hope you and Elise will be very happy together. You wholeheartedly deserve each other. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause as I made my exit, their voices buoying me up and filling me with a sense of empowerment. Dean's world might have been crashing down around him, but mine had just blown wide open with endless possibility. In the weeks following my dramatic confrontation with Dean, life took an unexpected turn. News of his humiliating downfall at the hands of his scorned almost bride quickly spread through our social circles like wildfire. Dean's career as a hotshot marketing director went up in flames as colleagues and clients lost all trust in his integrity. I heard through the grapevine that he had been forced into a less visible role, his dreams of continuing to climb the corporate ladder dashed. As for Elise, the ambitious coworker he had risked everything for, she slinked away with her tail between her legs once the truth came out. Turned out using Dean for career gain wasn't quite as appealing once his name was Mud. I couldn't say I felt even an ounce of pity for either of their plights. They had made their sleazy bed, now they could lie in it together. For me, however, an unexpected renaissance was blooming from the ashes of my former life. In the aftermath of the truth bomb I had dropped, I found myself flooded with support from friends, family, and even strangers inspired by my bold act of reclaiming my power. Emboldened by this outpouring of positivity, I decided to lean into my newfound role as a scorned woman turned empowerment icon. I launched a blog sharing my story and advice for others going through similar experiences of betrayal and loss of self-worth. To my surprise, it took off rapidly, resonating with people across the country who saw shades of their own struggles reflected in my Truth to Power tale. What had started as a cathartic passion project quickly blossomed into a full-blown community and platform for open, honest discussions about relationships, boundaries, and believing in oneself. As the blog's popularity exploded, I found a new confidence and sense of purpose that had been utterly lacking in my go-along-to-get-along existence with Dean. This was the real me. Bold, straightforward, unwilling to compromise my values and self-respect for anyone. My brother Tom was one of my biggest supporters throughout this renaissance. You know, part of me always worried Dean wasn't quite the perfect guy I built him up to be when I introduced you to, he admitted one day over coffee. But I never could have imagined. He shook his head. I'm just so damn proud of how you handled it all, sis. You're stronger than I ever knew. I gave his hand an affectionate squeeze, filled with gratitude for his unconditional love. I'm stronger than I ever knew too, to be honest. But I have you and this whole community to thank for helping me find that inner fire again. As the months rolled on, opportunities continued opening up for me. Book deals, speaking engagements, even starting my own podcast to let my voice be heard on a bigger platform. I reveled in this new world I had unlocked simply by deciding to bet on myself. One night, curled up on my cozy new couch, I found myself reflecting on just how far I had come since those first devastating moments of discovering Dean's betrayal. Back then I had felt so shattered, so utterly adrift and lacking in self-worth. But now I was truly, blissfully free. Free of Dean's lies, free of society's restrictive expectations, free to boldly embrace my authentic self without apology. I thought of the old Spanish proverb about the tongue having no bones, yet being one of the strongest parts of the body, and I smiled to myself. The truth had not just set me free, it had set me on fire. And I had no intention of letting that flames be extinguished anytime soon. This was just the spark that would go on to ignite an unstoppable blaze. I couldn't believe my eyes. There he was, my husband Dan, locked in an embrace with some young woman on our kitchen counter. The grocery bag slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. The woman smirked at me. I thought you were out of town. Dan quickly pulled away from her, panic spreading across his face. Kate, you should have told me you were coming back early. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. How could he act so nonchalant about being caught cheating in our own home? The woman hopped off the counter, not even bothering to cover up her state of undress. I'll leave you two lovebirds to sort this out, she said with a wink before sauntering past me out the front door. Dan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Kate, listen, I can explain. Explain what? I cut him off. How you've been screwing some hussy behind my back, in our bed? He flinched at my harsh words. It's not like that. It just happened. A hysterical laugh burst from my lips. It just happened? Are you kidding me right now? Dan took a step towards me, arms outstretched in a placating gesture. Baby, please, let's talk about this. But I couldn't bear to be near him, not after witnessing his ultimate betrayal with my own eyes. I snatched my car keys off the hook and stormed out without another word, desperate to put as much distance between us as possible. My mind was spinning out of control as I drove aimlessly. How could Dan do this to me, to us? After nearly a decade of marriage, memories of our life together assaulted me. Our chance meeting in college, falling deliriously in love, the day he got down on one knee. I choked back a sob. Had it all been a lie? By the time I pulled up at Jenny's place, I was an utter wreck. She took one look at my red-rimmed eyes and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Oh, Kate, what happened?" I could only shake my head, words failing me. Eventually, the whole sordid tale tumbled out between hiccuping sobs. Jenny's face darkened with rage, and she squeezed my hands tightly. "That lying bastard," she growled. "Don't worry, we'll make him pay for this. He messed with the wrong woman." Her conviction steadied me, allowing a glimmer of strength to shine through my despair. Perhaps there was a way to fight back against Dan's betrayal. Jenny was right. He would regret the day he ever took me for granted. I must have sat there for hours, staring blankly at the wall, as memories from my marriage with Dan flickered through my mind like an old movie reel. How could someone I loved and trusted so completely shatter my world into a million pieces? "You need to eat something," Jenny said gently, placing a plate of toast in front of me. I shook my head, my stomach churning with nausea. "At least have some water, then." I took a few sips from the glass, if only to appease her. Jenny had been a godsend, letting me crash at her place after walking in on that horrific scene. I don't know what I would have done without her steadying presence. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked carefully. I laughed bitterly. What's there to say? My husband turned out to be a lying, cheating scumbag. "Kate," Jenny wrapped a comforting arm around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. If there's anything I can do..." Unless you can turn back time and stop Dan from being an unfaithful prick, I don't think there's much anyone can do. She gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "For what it's worth, he never deserved you. I always thought he was kind of a pompous ass, if I'm being honest." I let out a watery chuckle, remembering how Dan used to get on Jenny's nerves with his constant bragging about work accomplishments no one cared about. Looking back, there were so many little warning signs that he was becoming selfish and arrogant. I was just too blind to see them. "You know, when we first met in college, he was so charming and sweet," I reminisced. "He'd leave these cute little notes in my textbooks, surprising me with chocolate-covered strawberries on our study dates." Jenny made a gagging sound. "Please, spare me the gory details of your once nauseating love life." I swatted her arm, feeling a bit lighter. "Hey, you asked." We fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. My mind kept drifting back to that terrible moment of discovery. Dan wrapped around some faceless woman, their tangled bodies leaving no doubt as to what sort of sordid act they'd been engaged in. White-hot anger flared in my chest. "He's going to pay for this, Jen," I said through gritted teeth. "I don't care what it takes. That son of a bitch is going to get exactly what he deserves." Jenny's expression turned fierce. "Don't worry, we'll make sure of it. He messed with the wrong girls." A twisted sense of satisfaction unfurled within me. Dan had made the biggest mistake of his life when he decided to throw away nearly a decade of marriage for some cheap fling. And by the time I was through with him, he'd be begging for forgiveness. Just when I thought my life couldn't get any more chaotic, I got a frantic call from my sister. Dad had suffered a bad fall and was being rushed to the hospital. I raced over, my mind mercifully distracted from thoughts of Dan's betrayal. Dad was lying pale and unconscious in the emergency room when I arrived. The doctors explained he'd taken a nasty tumble down the stairs and sustained a severe head injury. They needed to run more tests, but the prognosis wasn't looking good. Over the next few agonizing days, Dad drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was lucid, he didn't seem to recognize any of us. The doctors warned there could be lasting brain damage from the trauma. I felt utterly helpless watching my once vibrant father deteriorate before my eyes. Finally, they discharged him. But but with strict round-the-clock care instructions that would be impossible for my sister to manage alone with her 2 young kids. I didn't even hesitate before volunteering to be his primary caretaker. With everything so freshly imploded with Dan, it was a relief to focus my energy on something other than my own shattered heart. "Are you sure about this, Kate?" my sister asked worriedly as we got Dad settled at home. "This is going to be a lot of work." I forced a smile, pushing aside my doubts. Of course, Dad would do the same for us. And so I dove headfirst into the gruelingly difficult role of caring for my partially incapacitated father. Feeding, bathing, administering medications, it was utterly draining, both physically and emotionally. My once tidy home quickly descended into chaos and disarray. Not that Dan seemed to notice or care. "You've let this place go to shit," he muttered one evening as he shoved past me, his nose wrinkling in distaste at the pile of soiled towels in the corner. "I'm going out." My ire flared, but I bit back the heated retort hovering on my lips. I was simply too exhausted to expend more energy on him right now. If he wanted to slink off to meet his little hussy, so be it. In a way, his negligence was almost preferable to having him underfoot and making snide comments about my care for Dad that would inevitably ignite bitter arguments. At least this way there was one less person I had to worry about. As the months dragged on in a relentless cycle of mundane caretaking tasks, I started to see Dan's disinterest for what it truly was: selfishness and a callous indifference for anyone's needs but his own. Somewhere along the way, the man I fell in love with had become an utterly deplorable human being. One night, Dad shocked me by having one of his semi-lucid moments. "You're such a good girl, Katie," he murmured, patting my hand weakly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I felt tears prick my eyes at the rare moment of tenderness. "Don't worry, Dad, I'm not going anywhere." His brow furrowed slightly. "But what about Dan? He's lucky to have a wife like you." A melancholic look crossed his face. "Or at least he should realize how lucky he is." The words twisted like a knife in my gut. If only Dad knew the awful truth about his precious son-in-law's misdeeds. I forced a reassuring smile, not wanting to shatter his fragile peace of mind. "Don't worry about Dan," I said quietly. In that moment, I made a vow to myself, no matter what it took, that sorry excuse for a man would face the consequences of his despicable actions. If it was the last thing I did, I would make sure he got what he deserved. Months ticked by as I remained holed up at my dad's house, my entire world revolving around his care routine. Bathing, feeding, administering medications, the tasks became numbingly familiar. I tried not to think too much about the chaos my own life had devolved into. Dan's visits grew increasingly sporadic. Sometimes weeks would go by without me laying eyes on him. Not that I was complaining. His presence only seemed to agitate Dad with his perpetual scowls and huffs of annoyance. "Where's that sorry son-in-law of mine?" Dad would grumble whenever Dan was a no-show. "Out gallivanting around, I'll bet." I brushed it off with a non-committal mumble, not having the heart to reveal the sordid truth. Let Dad cling to his antiquated notions about marriage and family for as long as he could. When Dan did bother showing up, it was solely to raid the fridge and complain about the state of the house. "This place is a pigsty," he groused one evening, wrinkling his nose at the pile of dirty towels. "Why don't you clean up a bit?" White-hot rage lanced through me, as if single-handedly caring for my ailing father while he was off doing God knows what wasn't enough. "If the mess bothers you so much, be my guest and tidy up," I bit out. Dan snorted derisively. "That's women's work." The casual misogyny of his remark struck me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to let loose a blistering retort, but Dad chose that moment to call out for me weakly. "Coming, Dad," I managed to grit out, turning on my heel and storming off before I said something I might regret. Later that night, as I massaged feeling back into my aching hands, Dad fixed me with those rheumy eyes that still shone with disturbing lucidity at times. "Dan's a real piece of work, isn't he?" he said frankly. "I always figured he took you for granted, but this is something else." My breath caught in my throat as I studied the drawn face of the proud, robust man he once was. Had he deduced Dan's perfidy on some subconscious level? The thought was almost too horrible to bear. Yes, well, I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat. "Some men just don't realize how fortunate they are," Dad grunted in ironic agreement. Ain't that the truth? You deserve so much better than that, Katie. Tears burned my eyes as I squeezed his withered hand tightly. If only he knew the full, sickening extent of it all, the utter disrespect and humiliation Dan had subjected me to, but I wouldn't burden my sweet, ailing father with such ugliness. Not when he had more than enough troubles weighing on his fragile mind and body. No, there would be a reckoning for Dan's unforgivable sins soon enough. I could feel it simmering in my very bones like a primal force of nature waiting to be unleashed. He would atone for every last torment, every callous slight and indignity. I would make sure of it, or my name wasn't Kate Turner. After months of being Dad's sole caretaker, I was running on fumes. The doctor said he was stable enough for me to get a short respite, so I decided to head home for a few days to recharge. As I pulled into the driveway, an unfamiliar car was parked haphazardly on the lawn. Odd, Dan never mentioned having company over. I grabbed my bag from the trunk, too exhausted to ponder it much, and let myself inside with the spare key. The sound of raucous laughter immediately put me on edge. That definitely wasn't Dan's voice. Steeling myself, I followed the noise into the kitchen and stopped dead in my tracks. There was Dan, looking quite at home with a scantily clad woman draped all over him as they giggled like misbehaving teenagers. The grocery bags slipped from my numb grasp, clattering loudly to the floor. The woman's head whipped around, eyes widening almost comically when she noticed me. Oh, shit! Dan, however, barely reacted, almost like he'd been caught doing this before. Maybe he had. Kate, I can explain, he started, trying to extricate himself from the woman's hold. But I was already seeing red. Explain what? I snarled, cutting him off. How you've been screwing this hussy behind my back in our own damn bed. He flinched at my harsh words. Good. Baby, it's not what it looks like. I barked out a harsh laugh, cutting off whatever bullshit excuse was about to tumble from his lying mouth. Don't you baby me, you piece of garbage! The woman finally seemed to get the hint, casually righting her clothes as she slid off the counter. I'll leave you two lovebirds to sort this out. She purred with a daring wink. My hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, desperately fighting the urge to lunge at her. Dan didn't even spare her a glance as she sauntered past, already turning those sickening puppy dog eyes on me. Kate, please, we need to talk about this calmly. Calmly? I echoed in disbelief. You want to talk calmly after I just caught you dicking around with some random slut? Dan visibly bristled at my crass language, though it was nothing compared to the obscenities swirling through my mind. Don't talk like that, he snapped. You're better than this. The hypocrisy of his words made me see red all over again, like he had any right to judge me after his wanton infidelity. Snatching my car keys off the hook, I whirled on my heel and stormed for the front door before I did something I might regret. Dan scrambled after me, still babbling nonsensical pleas, but I tuned him out with ease. One thing was crystal clear in that moment. Our marriage was over. Finished. Done. He could beg and grovel all he wanted, but nothing would ever make me trust that lying snake again. I threw the car into drive and peeled out of there like a bat out of hell, tears of rage and humiliation stinging my eyes. How could he do this to me? To us? After nearly a decade of marriage and everything we'd been through? My mind kept cycling back to that repulsive image of him and that woman, intimate in ways that should have been reserved solely for me. I slammed my palm against the steering wheel, letting out a guttural scream of anguish. Well, two could play at that game. If Dan thought he could stamp all over my heart and get away with it, he had another thing coming. By the time I pulled up to Jenny's place, I was shaking with fury and an unsettling sense of determination. She took one look at my face and immediately ushered me inside. Tell me everything, she said once I was settled on her couch, placing a steaming mug of tea in my hands. I didn't hold back, recounting every single agonizing detail from start to bitter finish. Throughout it all, Jenny's expression grew progressively more thunderous. That lying sack of shit, she growled once I finally trailed off. We can't let him get away with this. She squeezed my hand fiercely. Don't worry, bestie. We're going to make him pay dearly for what he did to you. That bastard messed with the wrong woman. A mirthless smile tugged at my lips as our shared fury galvanized into a single-minded purpose. Dan thought he'd won by cheating on me so flagrantly? Well, He was about to learn the hard way that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I crashed at Jenny's place that night, too distraught to even consider going back to the house I had once called home. Sleep eluded me as images of Dan's betrayal played on a sickening loop in my mind's eye. Jenny tried her best to console me, alternating between gentle words of reassurance and furious rants about what a lying, cheating scumbag Dan was. As much as her anger resonated with my own, it didn't dull the sting of heartbreak shredding my insides. "That miserable prick doesn't deserve a single tear from you," she declared over breakfast, stabbing a fork full of eggs with excessive force. "We need to figure out how to make him pay for this." I rubbed my throbbing temples, the thought of vengeance doing little to lift my spirits at the moment. "And do what, Jen? It's not like I can take him to court over an affair." "Maybe not," she allowed, "but we can certainly make his life a living hell until he comes groveling for forgiveness." The idea held a certain vindictive appeal, I had to admit. After the fresh trauma Dan inflicted, the thought of him suffering even a fraction of my anguish scratched that primal itch for retribution. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm listening." A feral grin split Jenny's face as she launched into a dizzying array of increasingly over-the-top revenge schemes. Everything from airing his dirty laundry on social media to slashing his tires or egging his car. While cathartic, most of her ideas towed the line of illegal. "Those are all terrible plans that will just land us in jail," I pointed out dryly, once she'd run out of steam. "We need to think smarter, not crazier." Jenny threw her hands up in exasperation. "Well, I'm all ears if you've got a better idea." Worrying my lower lip, I watched her absent-mindedly fiddle with the ring on her finger, an ostentatious diamond that her husband could ill afford on his modest salary. A light bulb went off in my head. "What if we hit him where it'll really hurt?" I said slowly. "His money and reputation?" She cocked a questioning brow, but said nothing as I rapidly filled her in on my half-formed plan. By the time I finished, Jenny was practically vibrating with sadistic glee. "Oh, this is going to be perfect," she crowed. "Dan won't know what hit him." I squeezed her hand tightly, a resolved calm settling over me. He's about to learn that betraying me was the biggest mistake of his life. Over the next couple days, we got to work, laying the groundwork for my meticulously plotted revenge scheme. The first step was hiring a private investigator to dig up every last shred of proof documenting Dan's sordid affair. "Don't stop until you have enough evidence to bury that scumbag," I instructed the brusque older man Jenny found. He grunted in affirmation, already snapping pictures of the sleazy motel Dan liked to rendezvous with his mistress at. "Don't you worry, lady. I'll make sure he can't wriggle his way out of this one." With the PI on the case, the next move was identifying the other woman. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction when Jenny's internet sleuthing revealed the little harlot's name to be Laura Whitley, daughter of John Whitley, one of the wealthiest businessmen in our city. "Ooh, this is going to be good," Jenny cackled as she pulled up a photo, a pouting blonde with ridiculous duck lips who couldn't have been older than 22 or 23. "Just wait until Daddy finds out his little princess is a home-wrecking whore." A hard knot of resolution formed in my gut. Dan had made his bed, and now it was time to lie in it. He and his childish mistress were about to learn firsthand why hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. With the evidence against Dan finally compiled into a thick dossier courtesy of the private investigator, it was time to set the endgame of my revenge plot into motion. "You sure you want to go through with this?" Jenny asked, eyeing the file apprehensively. "Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back." I felt no such hesitation as I gave her a resolute nod. Dan brought this on himself the second he decided to cheat. He's going to face the consequences, no matter how severe. After attempting to call John Whitley's office several times with no luck, we decided a more personal touch was required. Loading up in Jenny's car, we headed across town to the absurdly opulent Whitley estate. The snooty gatekeeper tried waving us off at first, clearly unimpressed by our determination. But Jenny smoothly name-dropped Whitley's wayward daughter, and we were promptly ushered through to the palatial mansion beyond the gates. My insides twisted nervously as we stepped into the cavernous marble foyer. What if Whitley didn't believe us about Laura's affair? Or worse, what if he simply didn't care? This entire plan hinged on him being outraged enough by his daughter's indiscretion to take decisive action. A liveried butler appeared to escort us to Whitley's study, his expression giving nothing away. The heavy oak door swung open to reveal a regally furnished space lined with bookshelves, and one very intimidating older man seated behind an ornate desk. John Whitley cut an imposing figure with his tailored suit and severe salt-and-pepper hair. His piercing gaze swept over us dismissively as we settled into the chairs across from him. "I was told you have some important information regarding my daughter," he stated without preamble, steepling his fingers. "Well, I don't have all day." Squaring my shoulders, I laid out the file containing all the damning photographic proof and detailed logs of Dan's salacious hotel meetups with Laura. I didn't mince words as I explained how she had callously shattered my marriage in pursuit of her sordid affair with my husband. To his credit, Whitley maintained an infuriatingly stoic demeanor throughout, though his jaw ticked almost imperceptibly as I recounted walking in on the two tangled together like horny teenagers. "I see," he murmured once I'd finished, flipping through the damaging evidence with a critical eye. "And what, pray tell, do you expect me to do about this unfortunate situation?" White-hot anger lanced through me at his apparent indifference. "Isn't it obvious?" I seethed. "Your daughter is a shameless, lying homewrecker who helped destroy my marriage. There need to be consequences for that." Jenny laid a restraining hand on my arm, shooting the patriarch a pointed look. "With all due respect, sir, keeping this buried will only enable Laura's reckless behavior to continue unchecked. Surely, as her father, you want to impart some sense of morality?" Whitley's expression remained inscrutable for a long, agonizing moment. Then, clearing his throat, he reached for his phone and quickly dialed a number. "Carter, get the Hampstead team ready to mobilize immediately," he said crisply once the line connected. "I want all vendors and partners notified that effective at the end of this week, our business relationship will be terminated." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips as he hung up and turned his hawkish gaze back on us. "Thank you for bringing this unsavory matter to my attention. I assure you, my daughter's indiscretions will be handled with the appropriate severity." An almost gleeful shiver raced down my spine. If Whitley was taking such drastic measures to clean house at one of Dan's biggest corporate accounts, that could only mean one thing. He was about to lose his cushy, high-paying job over his despicable infidelity. Satisfaction sang through my veins as Jenny and I saw ourselves out of the mansion. The gears were finally in motion to ensure Dan paid for every last torment he'd put me through. As we climbed back into her car, my expression must have mirrored the sadistic glee coursing through me because Jenny reached over to squeeze my hand fiercely. "Don't worry, bestie. This is only the beginning of making that douchebag suffer." A twisted smile stretched my lips as I watched the Whitley estate disappear in the rearview mirror. "Oh, I'm counting on it." The look on Dan's face when we strode into that sleek corporate lobby was almost worth the anguish he'd put me through. Almost. His eyes widened comically at the sight of me, clearly not expecting me to be the one accompanying John Whitley's stone-faced security detail. I offered him a sweet smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Hey there, honey," I said, relishing the way he flinched at the saccharine endearment. "Surprised to see me?" Dan opened and closed his mouth several times, his usual unflappable confidence deserting him. "Kate, Mr. Whitley, what's going on here?" The older man fixed him with a withering stare. "I recently became aware of your utterly unacceptable dalliances with my daughter, Mr. Turner. Suffice it to say, I'm extremely displeased by your despicable conduct." If possible, Dan paled even further, a thin sheen of sweat blooming on his brow as the implication sank in. "Good, let the utter fool squirm." "Sir, I can assure you whatever you think is happening." "Save your pathetic groveling," Whitley cut him off with a disdainful wave. "You're being terminated from your position at Hampstead Enterprises effective immediately. Any further business with my company and its partners is officially severed." A muscle ticked in Dan's jaw, the first hint of his long-buried temper slipping through that meticulously crafted veneer of nonchalance. "With all due respect, you can't just fire me like that. Not without cause." The older man barked out a humorless laugh. You think I need cause after your sordid infidelity caused such embarrassment to my family? Don't delude yourself. Lawyers far costlier than you could ever afford have ensured this decision is unassailable. I had to choke back a burst of vindictive laughter at Dan's impotent scowl. For once, the arrogant prick was receiving precisely what he deserved, a harsh dose of karmic retribution. Just then, a familiar blonde head bobbed into view. Laura strode up in a tiny dress that left nothing to the imagination, clearly angling to pour on the vapid charm. Her expression soured upon catching sight of me. "Daddy, what's going on here?" she demanded in a simpering whine. "Why are you letting this psycho cause a scene?" "Enough, Laura," Whitley snapped, making her flinch. "Your utter lack of discretion has cost me dearly. As of today, you'll be cut off from any and all family resources and assets until you get your life in order." The blonde's jaw dropped in a mask of over-exaggerated shock. "You can't do that. I'll be ruined." "You've done quite enough to ruin this family's reputation already," her father said coldly. "Now, I suggest you gather what little dignity you have left and go. The police will be summoned if you linger." Her lower lip trembled petulantly, but a well-timed glare from the burly security guards had her slinking away with her tail between her legs. A lascivious smirk twisted my lips as Dan watched her go, his primary income and mistress ripped away in one fell swoop. He swallowed hard, the indignant mask finally shattering to reveal a broken, the pathetic excuse for a man. "Kate, please, you have to understand." "Understand what?" I cut him off, meeting his hollow gaze with steely resolve. "That you threw away nearly a decade of marriage and my unconditional love for a cheap fling with a vapid bimbo less than half your age?" Dan flinched as if struck. Good. Let the truth sting. His fragile ego deserved to be shattered into a million pieces just as thoroughly as he decimated my heart. Whitley motioned to his guards, and they began ushering Dan towards the exit without ceremony, but not before he cast me one last imploring look. "You're right," he rasped hollowly. "I should have told you I was coming back early. Enjoy your new life without everything you took for granted." A bitter smile tugged at my lips as I watched him being all but dragged out. After all his lies and betrayal, that pathetic excuse rang painfully hollow. As the door swung shut behind him, a weight finally lifted off my shoulders. Dan had been utterly stripped of his status, finances, job, every trapping that made up the pedestal he'd placed himself on above me. Justice had finally been served, in the most brutal and uncompromising way. And strangely, rather than the satisfaction I'd anticipated, I felt nothing but bone-deep wariness. "It's over," I murmured to myself as Whitley placed a gruff hand on my elbow. "Indeed," the older man replied, "though it remains to be seen whether this harsh lesson will truly impart any wisdom on my wayward daughter." I shrugged him off, eager to simply move on and escape the stifling tension that still hung in the air. Whatever Laura's fate, it hardly concerned me. "Thank you for handling the Dan situation," I offered politely. "I appreciate your assistance in making him face the consequences of his actions." A curt nod was my only answer as I turned on my heel and marched out of the building, leaving that sordid chapter of my life firmly behind closed doors. Would I ever be able to fully trust another man after this? Part of me wasn't sure if the effort was even worth attempting. But one thing was abundantly clear. The weak, simpering woman who'd allowed Dan's infidelity to destroy her sense of self-worth was gone forever. Whatever challenges still awaited, I would face them with my head held high and a newfound unshakable sense of independence. No longer would I ever let a man dictate my worth, my happiness, my entire existence. From this point on, I answered to no one but myself. The ringing of my cell phone pierced through the quiet stillness of my apartment. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a twinge of apprehension seeing my mother's name flash across the screen. Our relationship had been strained lately, a tangled web of unresolved tensions and past grievances. With a resigned sigh, I answered the call. "Lila, thank goodness you picked up." My mother's tremulous voice crackled through the line, laced with an urgency that instantly put me on edge. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound upset," I said, my brow furrowing with concern. It's terrible," she stammered, her words tumbling out in a jumbled rush. "I've been scammed, Lila. Someone claiming to be Franklin called and convinced me to transfer my life savings to an account they provided." A sickening dread washed over me as the weight of her words sank in. Franklin was my cousin, a kind-hearted man who would never stoop to such deceit. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this unfathomable situation. "Are you sure it wasn't Franklin? Why would he do something like that?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't know, but I'm certain it wasn't him," she insisted, her voice quivering with anguish. "I've lost everything, Lila. My retirement fund, the money I'd saved for emergencies, all gone." A surge of anger mingled with my shock, and I clenched my fist involuntarily. How could someone exploit the trust of an elderly woman like my mother? The thought made my blood boil, and I knew I had to get to the bottom of this despicable act. "Mom, listen to me," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "We're going to figure this out. I promise you, I won't rest until we uncover the truth and hold the person responsible accountable." A heavy silence hung between us, punctuated only by the sound of my mother's shuddering breaths. Finally, she spoke, her voice weighted with a mix of gratitude and resignation. "Thank you, Lila. I knew I could count on you." As I ended the call, a steely determination settled within me. This deceit had crossed a line, and I vowed to leave no stone unturned in my quest for justice. Little did I know that this was merely the beginning of a journey that would test the boundaries of trust and loyalty, one that would force me to confront the harsh realities of deception, even from those closest to me. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I navigated the winding country roads that led to my mother's house, a sense of trepidation weighing heavily on my mind. The conversation with Edith had left me reeling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this sordid tale than met the eye. As the miles melted away, my thoughts drifted to Nate, my husband of 12 years. Our marriage had been a tumultuous one, marred by his reckless financial decisions and a gambling addiction that had nearly bankrupted us years ago. I had worked tirelessly to rebuild our lives, but the scars of that betrayal still lingered, festering like an open wound. "You're overreacting, Lila," Nate had scoffed dismissively when I told him about the scam. "Your mother's just getting forgetful in her old age. It's probably a misunderstanding." His cavalier attitude only fueled my suspicions, and I found myself questioning his potential involvement. Could he have orchestrated this elaborate scheme to swindle my mother's savings? The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't ignore the lingering doubts that gnawed at me. As I pulled into the familiar driveway, memories of my childhood came flooding back. Laughter-filled summers spent chasing fireflies, the comforting scent of my mother's homemade apple pie wafting through the house. But those idyllic recollections were tainted by the harsh reality of the present, a reality where trust had been shattered, and deception cast a dark shadow over our once close family. Edith greeted me at the door, her face etched with worry lines that seemed to have deepened since our last encounter. Without a word, she ushered me inside, and we settled into the living room, a graveyard of faded photographs and mementos from happier times. "I've been going over the bank statements," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "There are multiple transfers to an account I've never seen before, all made under the guise of family emergencies." I studied the documents she handed me, my heart sinking as I traced the paper trail of deceit. A sick feeling settled in the pit of my stomach as I noticed a pattern. The account numbers bore an eerie resemblance to those I had once shared with Nate during our financial entanglement. "Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I think I might know who's behind this." Edith's eyes widened, a flicker of hope mingled with fear dancing across her features. I knew then that I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. My mother had been betrayed in the cruelest way imaginable, and I would stop at nothing to ensure justice was served. The musty scent of old photograph albums and faded memories hung heavy in the air as Edith and I pored over the financial records strewn across the coffee table. With each passing moment, the tangled web of deceit grew more intricate, more suffocating. "I can't believe Nate would do something like this," Edith murmured, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "After everything you two have been through together." I pursed my lips, trying to maintain an air of composure, but the anger simmering beneath the surface threatened to boil over. Nate's gambling addiction had nearly torn our family apart years ago, and the scars of that betrayal still ran deep. Money was always his weakness, I said bitterly, sifting through the stack of bank statements. But to steal from his own mother-in-law? That's a new low, even for him. Edith's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she studied the documents, her hands trembling slightly. "Look at this," she whispered, sliding a printout toward me. My gaze fell upon a series of transactions, each one more substantial than the last, all funneled into an account bearing an uncanny resemblance to the ones Nate and I had shared during our financial struggles. "Do you think?" Edith's voice trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. I clenched my jaw, a surge of fury coursing through my veins. The evidence was damning, but a part of me still clung to the faint hope that there was a reasonable explanation, that Nate hadn't truly sunk to such despicable depths. "I need to talk to him," I said, my tone resolute. "If he's involved in this, he's going to come clean, and he's going to make things right." Edith nodded, her expression a mixture of sadness and determination. As I stood to leave, she reached out and grasped my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman of her age. "Be careful, Lila," she cautioned. "If Nate is capable of betraying his own family like this, there's no telling how far he'll go to cover his tracks." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed the nagging sense of dread aside. I had to confront Nate, to look him in the eye and demand the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. As I made my way to the car, the weight of the situation pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. But beneath the surface, a steely resolve burned bright. I would get to the bottom of this, and if Nate was indeed the mastermind behind this heinous scheme, he would face the full consequences of his actions. Family or not, there would be no mercy for those who preyed on the vulnerable and exploited the sacred bonds of trust. The quaint local cafe was a familiar haunt, but the welcoming ambiance did little to quell the storm of emotions brewing within me as I waited for Nate to arrive. My heart pounded with a mixture of dread and anticipation, and I found myself fidgeting nervously with the sugar packets on the table. When he finally walked through the door, a forced smile etched onto his features, I felt a surge of anger rise within me. How dare he play the role of the oblivious husband when the evidence of his betrayal was staring us in the face? "Leela, sweetheart," he greeted, leaning in to plant a kiss on my cheek. I recoiled instinctively, and his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's going on? You said we needed to discuss our finances." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Cut the act, Nate," I said, my voice low and steady. "I know about the scam. I know you've been siphoning money from my mother's accounts." His eyes widened briefly, but he quickly regained his composure, a practiced mask of innocence sliding into place. "Whoa, slow down. What are you talking about? I would never do anything to hurt your mom." I slid the stack of bank statements across the table, the damning evidence laid bare before him. These transactions tell a different story. The account numbers match ones we used years ago when you nearly gambled us into bankruptcy. Nate's gaze flickered to the papers, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by a cavalier shrug. "Coincidence," he scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "You're reading too much into this, Lila." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to reach across the table and shake him until the truth came spilling out. "Don't lie to me, Nate. Not again. I want the truth, all of it." His eyes narrowed, and a hint of the darkness that lurked beneath his charming facade began to seep through. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" he sneered. "Always holding the past over my head, never giving me a chance to move on." I recoiled at the venom in his words, but I refused to back down. "If you're innocent, then explain these transactions. Explain why my mother was duped into transferring her life savings to an account linked to you." Nate's jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might actually come clean. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, his expression softened, and he reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. "Lila, listen to me," he said, his voice dripping with feigned sincerity. "I know things haven't been easy between us, but I promise you, I had nothing to do with this. Your mother must have gotten confused or fallen for some scam artist's lies." I wanted so desperately to believe him, to cling to the shreds of trust that still remained between us, but the evidence was damning, and the seed of doubt had taken root, growing with every evasive answer and half-truth that spilled from his lips. As I left the cafe, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of me still clung to the hope that Nate was innocent, that this was all a colossal misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew the truth. He was involved, and I would stop at nothing to expose his deceit and make him pay for betraying our family's trust. The private investigator's office was dimly lit, the air thick with the lingering scent of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. As I sank into the worn leather chair across from him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. This was the last resort, the final gambit in my desperate quest to uncover the truth about Nate's involvement in the scam against my mother. "What can I do for you, Miss Thompson?" the PI asked, his voice a gruff rumble that seemed to match the no-nonsense demeanor he exuded. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves. "I need you to investigate my husband, Nate Thompson. I believe he's been involved in a scheme to defraud my elderly mother out of her life savings." The PI raised an eyebrow, his expression betraying no hint of surprise or judgment. "That's a serious accusation. What makes you suspect your husband?" Without hesitation, I laid out the evidence, the suspicious bank transfers, the evasive answers, and Nate's history with financial misdeeds. As I spoke, the PI's gaze never wavered, his eyes sharp and analytical. "I'll need to gather more information, but based on what you've told me, it's certainly possible your husband is involved," he said finally, his tone pragmatic. "Do you have any leads or potential accomplices we should look into?" I hesitated, my mind flashing back to Nate's odd behavior during our confrontation at the cafe. There had been something almost rehearsed about his denials, as if he were reading from a script. There might be someone else involved, I mused aloud. During our conversation, Nate seemed coached almost, like he was sticking to a predetermined story. The PI nodded, jotting down a few notes. "All right, we'll start digging into his associates, see if anyone stands out. But you should prepare yourself, Miss Thompson. If your husband is guilty, the truth might not be pretty." His words hung heavy in the air, a sobering reminder of the potential consequences that lay ahead. But I had come too far to turn back now. Nate's betrayal had cut deeper than any wound, and I was determined to see justice served, no matter the cost. Over the next few days, the PI's investigation yielded startling results. Nate had been funneling my mother's money into a separate account, one belonging to a mysterious woman named Clarissa Green. Surveillance footage and financial records painted a damning picture. Nate and Clarissa had been meeting regularly, their interactions laced with an intimacy that suggested a deeper connection than mere acquaintances. As the pieces fell into place, a sickening realization dawned on me. Nate hadn't just orchestrated this scam for financial gain. He had done it to fund his sordid affair with this Clarissa woman, using my mother's hard-earned savings as a twisted means to an end. The depth of his depravity was staggering, and I found myself consumed by a burning rage unlike anything I had ever experienced before. Nate had not only betrayed our family's trust, but he had also desecrated the sanctity of our marriage vows, all for the sake of his selfish desires. As I clutched the damning evidence in my trembling hands, a steely resolve took hold. Nate and his accomplice would face the full weight of their crimes, and I would be the one to deliver them to justice, no matter how painful the journey might be. This was more than just a quest for restitution. It was a battle for redemption, a chance to reclaim the trust and honor that had been so callously stripped away. The crisp autumn air did little to temper the fury simmering within me as I strode purposefully through the park, clutching the damning evidence against my chest. Nate's betrayal had left a bitter taste in my mouth, a festering wound that refused to heal. As he came into view, seated on a weathered park bench, my steps faltered momentarily. Despite everything, a part of me still clung to the foolish hope that this was all some colossal misunderstanding, that the man I had vowed to love and cherish wasn't capable of such depravity. But as our eyes met, any lingering doubt evaporated. His expression was a carefully constructed mask of indifference, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes as he registered the steely resolve etched onto my features. "Lila?" he greeted, rising to his feet with a nervous chuckle. "What's all this about? You're looking at me like you're about to start swinging." I bristled at his nonchalant demeanor, my fingers tightening around the stack of documents. "Cut the act, Nate. I know everything." His bravado faltered, and he shifted uncomfortably, jamming his hands into his pockets. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I have proof that you've been siphoning money from my mother's accounts, funneling it into a separate fund to support your affair with that woman, Clarissa." Nate's eyes widened, and for a moment the mask slipped, revealing a glimpse of the true monster lurking beneath the surface. But just as quickly he regained his composure, shaking his head in feigned disbelief. "That's a pretty wild accusation, Lila. Do you really think I'm capable of something like that?" "I used to think you were a better man than this," I countered, my words laced with bitterness. "But the evidence speaks for itself. You've been lying to me, to my mother, to everyone who trusted you." Nate's jaw clenched, and a flicker of anger danced across his features. "So what? You're just going to throw away our entire marriage over some circumstantial evidence, after everything we've been through together?" His words were like a slap to the face, and I recoiled as if struck. "Our marriage was built on lies and deceit, Nate. This is just the final nail in the coffin." For a moment, silence stretched between us, the weight of our shattered vows hanging heavy in the air. Then, with a weary sigh, Nate sank back onto the bench, his head cradled in his hands. "You're right," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I did it. All of it. The money, the affair, everything." As his confession washed over me, I felt a strange sense of relief mingled with an overwhelming sadness. The truth had finally come to light, but at what cost? "Why, Nate?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Why would you betray your own family like this?" He lifted his head, and the expression on his face was one of pure remorse, or perhaps it was simply a masterful performance, another layer of deceit. "I was weak," he admitted, his gaze fixed on the ground. "The gambling, the debts, I thought I could handle it. But then Clarissa came along, and suddenly there was this tantalizing escape from reality. I never meant to hurt you or your mother, but I got in too deep. I'm sorry, Lila." His apology rang hollow, a feeble attempt to salvage what little shred of humanity remained within him. As I studied his broken form, I felt a strange sense of pity. Not for him, but for the man I had once believed him to be. "Save your excuses," I spat, turning on my heel. "You'll have plenty of time to reflect on your mistakes when you're behind bars." As I walked away, leaving Nate to wallow in the ruins of his own making, a sense of grim determination settled over me. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was prepared to see this through to the bitter end. Justice would be served, and my family's honor would be restored. No matter the cost. The police station was a hive of controlled chaos, a flurry of activity that betrayed little of the gravity of the situation at hand. As I sat across from Detective Garcia, a seasoned veteran with a no-nonsense demeanor, I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. "Miss Thompson, are you certain you want to go through with this?" he asked, his gaze piercing. "Once we set this sting operation in motion, there's no turning back." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. Nate's confession had been a bitter pill to swallow, but it had also galvanized my determination to see justice served. No longer was this a personal vendetta. It was a matter of principle, of upholding the sanctity of the law. "I'm sure, Detective," I replied, my voice unwavering. "Nate and his accomplice, Clarissa, need to face the consequences of their actions. They've hurt my family deeply, and I won't rest until they're behind bars." Garcia nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his weathered features. "All right, then, here's the plan." The details were intricate, a carefully orchestrated dance of deception and misdirection. Nate would be lured to a predetermined location under the guise of a supposed transfer of more of my mother's funds to Clarissa. Little would he know that the entire scenario was a meticulously crafted trap, with undercover officers lying in wait to apprehend them both in the act. As the hour of reckoning drew near, I found myself pacing the confines of the surveillance van, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Despite Nate's despicable actions, a part of me still clung to the lingering threads of affection that had once bound us together, threads that now felt frayed and tattered beyond repair. The radio crackled to life, signaling the commencement of the operation. Through the grainy footage on the monitors, I watched as Nate arrived at the rendezvous point, his shoulders hunched and his gaze darting nervously from side to side. Moments later, Clarissa appeared, a predatory smile playing across her lips as she approached Nate. The exchange was brief, a flurry of hushed words and furtive glances, before the unmistakable exchange of an envelope, the supposed payment for their vile deeds. That was the signal the officers had been waiting for. In a blur of movement, they descended upon the unsuspecting duo, their shouts of "Police! Don't move!" ringing out like a death knell. Nate's expression was one of pure, unadulterated horror as the handcuffs clicked into place around his wrists. Clarissa, on the other hand, remained defiant, spitting venom and curses at the officers who restrained her. As they were led away, their heads bowed in ignominy, I felt a strange sense of hollowness settle within me. The adrenaline that had propelled me this far had dissipated, leaving me adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The man I had once loved was now a mere shell of his former self, a cautionary tale of greed and deceit run amok. And yet, beneath the sorrow and the anger, there was a glimmer of hope. A hope that my family could begin to rebuild and heal from the wounds inflicted by this betrayal. As I stepped out of the van, the cool evening air caressing my face, I allowed myself a small, bittersweet smile. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. A future where trust and honor were not mere concepts, but the bedrock upon which our lives would be rebuilt. The courtroom was a study in contrasts. The polished wood paneling and imposing marble columns exuded a sense of grandeur, while the stern expressions etched onto the faces of the judge and jury spoke volumes about the gravity of the proceedings. As Nate and Clarissa were led in, their wrists bound by heavy shackles, I couldn't help but feel a surge of vindication. The smug arrogance that had once defined their demeanor had been replaced by a palpable air of defeat, a silent acknowledgement that their web of lies had finally unraveled. The trial was a formality, a mere exercise in due process. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Bank records, surveillance footage, and my own damning testimony painted a picture of calculated deception and breach of trust. As the judge handed down their sentences, 15 years for Nate, 10 for Clarissa, I searched their faces for any semblance of remorse. But all I saw was a hollow emptiness, a chasm where their souls should have been. It was over. The nightmare that had consumed my life for what felt like an eternity had finally reached its conclusion. And yet, as I watched the bailiffs lead them away, I felt no sense of victory, no cathartic release from the torment they had inflicted upon my family. The restitution we received, a paltry sum in comparison to the emotional toll of their betrayal, did little to assuage the lingering ache in my heart. My mother's savings had been replenished, but her trust in humanity had been shattered. A wound that would take far longer to heal. As we stepped out into the crisp autumn air, Edith turned to me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "It's over, Lila," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can finally move on." I nodded, forcing a smile that felt hollow and brittle. "Yes, Mom, we can start rebuilding our lives." And yet, as we embraced, I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of me had been irrevocably changed by this ordeal. The blind trust I had once placed in those closest to me had been shattered, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt that threatened to consume me. In the weeks that followed, Edith and I made a conscious effort to forge ahead, to reclaim the lives that had been so cruelly disrupted by Nate and Clarissa's actions. We downsized, selling the family home and seeking solace in a cozy apartment in the heart of the city. As we unpacked the remnants of our past, sifting through boxes of cherished mementos and faded photographs, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. So much had been lost, not just material possessions, but the very foundations upon which our family had been built. But amidst the rubble, there was a glimmer of hope, a newfound appreciation for the unbreakable bond that had kept us together through this tumultuous journey. We had been tested, our faith in humanity shaken to its core, but we had emerged on the other side, battered but not broken. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, I found myself standing at the window, gazing out at the bustling cityscape below. A new chapter was unfolding, one filled with equal parts trepidation and possibility. The road to healing would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. A future where trust and redemption were not mere concepts, but tangible rewards for those brave enough to weather the storm.